But it's got to go now to Bathurst, and it'll probably be a little bit of a procedure getting my SIN number back again.
And has anyone at any stage of this process given you any clue as to what would be in it for a person to call?
No. That has never been addressed or brought up at all. And again, my biggest concern was getting, my benefits reinstated, but was my identity compromised?
How many phone calls have you made?
Oh, at least a dozen.
How many hours on the phone?
Lots. I would probably say an hour per each. Some of them longer, some of them shorter, and 3 trips into town to the office. There's a lot of seniors who couldn't deal with that and who would be unable to follow through on it.
So where things stand right now, you're waiting for the calls? I'm not expected to make any more calls or do any more visits?
No, but if I don't hear something, I certainly will. That I can guarantee you. A large number of seniors have had this happen. To me, 1 or 2 should red flag that somebody's not being either careful or that there's some fraud.
And so when you make those calls, how do you describe what's happened?
Usually I laugh and say, I'd like to come back to life again, please.
You open with that?
Or I'm dead and we need to fix this.
Good morning. It is 3 minutes to 6, Wednesday, February 12th. Getting near the middle of the month here, folks. Cold, frigid, extreme cold warning continues for most of the province. It does include Winnipeg, and mainly sunny today and clear. High minus 21, but you know what I'm going to say with wind chill? Just cover up. Don't be exposed to what's going to feel like minus 40. The commute this morning, take care if it's a little icy out there. And if you need to call us, 788-3093. That's the number through the show. Good morning to Chloe Friesen, who is making a surprise appearance, filling in for Corey this morning. Morning, Chloe. Good morning to Abby Adiemi, who's behind the controls again today. Of course, we'll hear Abby covering weather on the air. Chloe's directing and covering the commute. And good morning to Kevin Nipatebo, who is waving hello on YouTube from our control room this morning. Hi, Kev. Kev's our producer of YouTube. All right, let's get to Heather Wells. Always lots of news developing. Let's see where she's going to start. She's live in our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, close to 200 people have spent the night in a downtown Winnipeg warming shelter this week, trying to escape this extended cold freeze. Salome Mission says a demand recently expanded because of the spike in demand. They've expanded their overnight warming space. The interim CEO at Salome, Julian Aitken, says outreach vans are patrolling downtown. She says Salome is also in desperate need of winter clothing, especially mitts and warm socks. And medical crews, she says, are treating people for frostbite, so do be careful out there. The Canadian African Cup of Nations says none of the suspects connected to the homicide of Mohamed Abdullahi had ever played in its soccer tournaments. The 22-year-old was gunned down last summer. Police announced arrests yesterday and have executed a warrant for an outstanding suspect. So we'll hear the latest on that in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, this morning in our first hour of the show, we are continuing to talk tariffs. The premiers, we're going to hear more about this as well. The premiers are in Washington, including Wab Kinew. So we'll hear that on World Report, but we'll get some more analysis of the tariffs, the tariff threat. In addition, a little bit later in the program, we're actually going to meet a young Winnipegger who's made Tourette syndrome his superpower, he says. So stay tuned for that.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
We must become more than we were programmed to be.
The Oscar-nominated film The Wild Robot breaks some of the rules of modern animation. It has an old-school look. It focuses on motherhood. It has a subtle warning about climate change. The filmmaker and animator Chris Sanders will be here to tell you why. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada's politicians are fighting for free trade with the United States and for the attention of our American neighbors. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is in Washington alongside all the other premiers.
I'm a big believer in the old adage, relate before you negotiate. And so part of this is about relationship building.
Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc is also there for high-level talks with his counterpart. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Defence Minister Bill Blair are at talks in Brussels, standing up for Canada's sovereignty.
I would hope that the President will be briefed, for example, on how NORAD works. And for over 70 years, Canada and the United States have shared responsibility for continental defence through the NORAD arrangement.
And the Public Safety Minister is headed back to the border to show off our new security. Janice McGregor is watching it all from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what are the premiers hoping to accomplish today?
Marcia, for this lobbying campaign to work, premiers got to get themselves in front of people who have the power to influence Donald Trump and his inner circle. This assumes, though, that voices in Congress are prepared to stick their necks out and use their authority to push back against this tariff strategy. And so far, we haven't seen very much of that. Still, efforts continue to find Americans who get it and are prepared to be honest with Trump supporters that this isn't going to make U.S. industries rich. It's going to inflict great harm for manufacturers and consumers, too. Quebec Premier François Legault remains confident that his province's relatively green aluminum is still going to find a home. It's just going to get way more expensive.
Nobody believes that he can make more aluminum in the United States.
The difference between what we heard from premiers last week and this week, no premiers are making big threats to retaliate. At least not yet. The focus for the moment seems to be keeping tariffs off in the first place.
How does all of that dovetail with what Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc is doing today?
He's meeting in person with the Commerce Secretary at the heart of Trump's tariff strategy, Howard Lutnick. The economic arguments against this probably need to be relayed to and through him. Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne said, based on his meetings in Washington last week, corporate giants like Ford Motor Company, for example, are starting to make noise.
The tone is changing. Now it's American CEOs which are speaking up.
The strategy, though, behind Canada's campaign is premised on presidential power still being capable of being influenced, constrained by checks and balances. Unfortunately, so far, Trump's been unimpeded in his authoritarian push, with executive order after executive order flooding out of the White House.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor, reporting from Ottawa. The future of Ukraine is taking center stage at two high-profile meetings today. European Union foreign ministers are meeting in Paris, while U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is at NATO headquarters in Brussels. They will not only be discussing future support for Ukraine, but President Volodymyr Zelensky's proposal of a land swap with Russia. The CBC's Christel Gomansing has more.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth shakes hands with his UK counterpart John Healey at NATO headquarters in Brussels. The exchange of pleasantries kicks off a series of conferences on security that will include Ukraine. Russian officials, meanwhile, say they're focused on peace through strength. A Russian Federation attack helicopter lifting off, striking, according to Russian Ministry of Defense, Ukrainian positions dug into the Kursk region.
I don't think Ukraine invaded the Kursk region in Russia with the intent of occupying it permanently.
Kurt Volker was the U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine during the first Trump administration.
They have something that Russia wants. Russia has something that they want. They can do a trade.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Guardian newspaper he plans to offer the Russian territory in exchange to help end the war. That has been a priority for President Donald Trump. Zelensky is expected to meet Trump's second-in-command, J.D. Vance, at the Munich Security Conference on Friday. As Ukrainians clean up following a deadly strike on the capital region, Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, called the idea of a land trade nonsense, citing today's early morning attack as a sign of Russia's strength. Christel Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Estonian foreign intelligence says China is playing a significant role in Russian military drone production. Some critical components of the drones are made in Western countries. Estonian intelligence, China has essentially become a smuggling hub, helping Russia work around the sanctions to get the high-tech parts it needs. The report suggests as much as 80% of these military drone components now reach Russia through China. Uganda's HIV clinics are now closed. The government quickly phased them out after the Trump administration froze U.S. aid funding. The clinics were created in the 1990s. They provided relief to hospitals overwhelmed with patients. Uganda has received hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. support for care and treatment. Isabel Nakaria has more from Kampala on the uncertainty of their fate.
I don't remember my primary school life spending more than a month without being hospitalized.
Josephine Nabukenya was born with HIV. She started taking antiretroviral drugs when she was 12 years old. Now, 28 years later, Nabukenya says she's alive because of care and treatment from U.S. aid funding to Uganda. Nabukenya says life without her drugs is a death sentence.
I got herpes zoster 3 times. The worst time I got it was in the mouth. I couldn't eat. For like 2 weeks, I could not eat anything. So life without medication brings so many opportunistic infections that actually lead to the person's death.
1.2 million Ugandans living with HIV are on medication. Over 80% of this support comes from U.S. funding. The Ministry of Health has now shut down all HIV clinics in public facilities and integrated HIV services with general health care services. But Diana Atwini, the permanent secretary with Uganda's Ministry of Health, says it shouldn't affect patients.
In most of these clinics, the people who would receive in HIV people, they are just medical officers, junior people, even nurses. But we are saying, no, this time you must come and be seen by the doctor in our clinic.
A waiver of life-saving assistance like HIV care was issued as the U.S. reviews its foreign policy. But this temporary relief is putting a lot of anxiety on Nabukenya and millions of others living with HIV. Isabel Nakiria for CBC News, Kampala.
The United Nations Human Rights Office estimates as many as 1,400 people were killed last summer in Bangladesh. It all happened in a period of 6 weeks. During student-led protests against the now ousted prime minister, a UN team was deployed to Bangladesh to investigate. Their report is now out. It says security and intelligence services systematically violated the protesters' rights, and authorities' actions could amount to crimes against humanity. Thousands of unplanned power outages left many Nova Scotians in the dark last year. A CBC News analysis found that meant on any given day in 2024, some people in the province were without power. Nicholas again has more on what happened and what's being done to prevent it from happening again.
When the power goes out, cattle farmer David Meister loses his watering system, fences, and barn cleaner. They are all electric, so caring for the animals at his ranch in New Ross, Nova Scotia gets a lot harder.
You don't know when it's going to go out or for how long it's going to be back. That just adds to the uncertainty.
A CBC News analysis identified more than 4,700 power outages in Nova Scotia last year, with a median 65 customers affected each time. There was just one day where the power stayed on for everyone.
There should be months on end without outages.
Lucia Muhlenbox is an energy economics professor at the University of Calgary.
It sounds like a tremendous number of outages.
Nova Scotia Power has been fined 4 times since 2019 by the province's regulatory body for falling short of some performance standards. The utility says trees on power lines, high winds, and fires are top outage causes. Matt Drover is the Senior Director of Energy Delivery at Nova Scotia Power.
Reliability has definitely been challenged by the increase of the severe and frequent storms.
Drover says in the next 5 years, Nova Scotia Power is planning to spend $1.3 billion on power reliability upgrades.
We're out cutting trees every single day. We're replacing power poles. We're replacing the equipment on top of the poles.
Some in rural areas, like Meister, say the work seems to be paying off so far. He's hoping his lights will stay on all winter. Nicholas Sagan, CBC News, New Ross, Nova Scotia.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Holy snowballs! It's minus 39 in Thompson. That's without the wind chill. You're welcome. That line from Kevin Ipatebo, who is our YouTube producer. Wow, we're trying to make sense of this. We've got dangerous cold out there in Winnipeg, an extreme cold warning for, in fact, most of the province. We're going to get into the forecast in a moment. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Thanks for joining us on CBC, 89.3, 990 AM on the app, and as I mentioned, on YouTube. Well, this hour, we're going to hear how a former Winnipeg golf course is being transformed this weekend into a cross-country ski course. For one weekend only, so we'll take you over to the University of Manitoba for that story. Also, 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. Yesterday, the mayor of Selkirk was on the show talking about how people are nervous there. Of course, there's some 500 workers in the steel industries in Selkirk. We're going to get some more analysis this morning from an assistant professor of economics at McMaster University, looking at just how much this could hurt across Canada. So stay tuned for that. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who has our headlines this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, yes. And all 13 Canadian premiers in Washington today kicking off that joint lobbying effort aimed at convincing the Trump administration to back away from its ongoing tariff threats. Manitoba's Wab Kinew.
I'm a big believer in the old adage, relate before you negotiate.
Now, the Premier calls it a window of opportunity to connect with steelworkers in America to let them know what benefits Manitoba steelworkers benefits them as well. We'll hear more from the Premier coming up. As well, extreme cold is putting extra pressure on Winnipeg's downtown overnight warming space at Siloam Mission. Interim CEO Julianne Aitken says the number of people needing help has ballooned to close to 200 because of this long-lasting deep freeze. We're going to hear how Siloam is coping coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, everything is creaking this morning. Your body, your bones, your car doors, your snow when you're walking on it. It is just when we thought it couldn't get colder, Abby, look, it's colder.
Yeah, it's cold. Yeah.
Right?
It's cold already. We already knew like for the rest of the week it's going to be pretty darn cold for this part of the province. But up north it's pretty colder up there. Extreme cold continues across the province, and we still have that extreme cold warnings in effect for all of Manitoba. Most regions experiencing wind chills of minus 40 and even colder this morning. It will try to improve during the day, but then overnight it will return again. We're going to see wind chills like close to minus 43 in some areas. Conditions in Winnipeg, where we also have that extreme cold warning. We are currently frosty at minus 24, mainly clear conditions at this time. Lots of sunshine in the forecast today, but it will be chilly out there if you're making that transition from one bus to another. Highs says it will be around minus 21. However, the wind chill is going to be around minus 36, minus 37 this morning. So frostbite is something you need to take into consideration. And for other regions from the Red River Valley up north, we're experiencing similar dangerous conditions. We're going to see sunny skies, but temperatures will remain extremely cold in most of the region. For Winnipeg, we're at minus 24 at this time.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the morning commute with Chloe Friesen, who's filling in for Corey Funk. Surprise!
Surprise!
We hope Corey feels better. He's a little bit under the weather.
Better, Corey.
Yeah. How's the commute?
Yeah, so far so good. Nothing is standing out to me on any of our maps here. Manitoba 511 highways are looking good. Here in Winnipeg, I haven't heard of any stalls or collisions or anything that should be slowing you down this morning. But of course, if you do spot something that is getting in your way or something you think your fellow commuters should know about, let us know. Call our commuter line. That number is 204-788-3093.
Well, up first on the show this morning, typically the former golf course outside the University of Manitoba, it's just right there on the property, in fact, is empty right now. But starting tomorrow, it's going to be jam-packed with skiers eager to go cross-country skiing. UM Properties owns the land, and they're inviting Winnipeggers to come out and ski or fat bike and enjoy a warm cup of hot chocolate. Greg Rogers is the company's CEO and up early to talk more about it. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
So some Winnipeggers might remember that land from when it was, a golf course. And there are big plans, right, for the future of the land. I know at one point I was touring it, and the plan was something called University with residences and businesses. That is still in the works, right? Just before we get to what's happening this weekend.
Yes, absolutely. That's still the plan. We are approved for 11,500 multifamily residential units and up to 1 million square feet of commercial on the site. In addition to which, and surrounding all of these new residences and commercial buildings will be about 21 acres of parkland, including 9 acres along the river. So it's going to be a pretty spectacular community adjacent to the university, the hospital, and Smart Park.
What's the time frame for the development now? Where are you guys at with it?
Well, our first phase is serviced, and we hope to have the first building go up this year. It'll take about 20 years to build out the entire community.
You're talking about sort of the community and the adjacent parkland. So what have you been doing in the meantime? I understand you've been doing some preservation and some planting.
We've cataloged over 5,000 old-growth trees on the property, including one that one of our favorites, who we've named Bob, who's 300 years old, an old oak tree along the river. So in addition to cataloging all these trees, we're managing their health and welfare. And we've added another 703 trees in the last year, planning to add another 200 this year, so that within the next 5 years, we'll see another 1,000 trees or more planted on site, bringing the total to just over 6,000 old-growth trees. So it's very unusual in an urban redevelopment site to be so well canopied with old-growth trees. And we're preserving them all by basically building on the fairways.
I love this. So this was, I always get it wrong. I want to say Southport, or it might have been South Point Golf Club back in the day.
It was the old Southwood Golf Course.
Southwood!
Yes. Yeah, there you go. You were close.
Third time's the charm, Greg.
Yes.
I love the picture you're drawing, though, of all the trees and what you're doing to preserve the land and stuff. And we'll get to the event this weekend in a moment, because that'll be beautiful for people to ski around. But tell us more about Bob. How did this come to be? Was Bob in full bloom when you noticed and you got someone out to sort of
it was
learn
part
about
of
him?
cataloging the trees. I'm always curious about different trees and how old they were, and what they saw before we got here. They've been around since long before the Canada became Canada. What they saw long ago. They saw settlers in Winnipeg, Métis settlers, to in fact from Louis Riel's group, militia group, were settlers on this property long ago. So they've seen a lot of history, and that's a big part of what we hope to bring out in the celebration of life and nature that's on site, is reflecting on the history that they've all witnessed over, in Bob's case, 300 years.
So cool. Did I ask you what kind of tree it is?
It's an oak tree.
An oak tree. Okay, you might have mentioned. I apologize. All right, let's get to the skiing. What's happening this weekend?
So we have a ski and fat bike event. Manitoba Trail, Winnipeg Trails is sponsoring a free event where they supply all of the cross-country ski equipment for people to come out and give cross-country skiing a go. If you've never had any experience with cross-country skiing, now's your chance to come and do it for free. All the gear is provided, instructions provided. We've got trails that are groomed and all set up for people to go and give it a try. We've also got Kendrick's Adventures providing fat bikes and tours. We've got fat bike tours that go along the river all the way around the Pointlands. And then in between fat biking and cross-country skiing, we have hot chocolate for free also, and a big fire to keep warm by. And on Friday night, we have a DJ. So there's going to be lots of activity on site. It's going to be really fun.
Do you just show up, or do you have to sign up?
You have to sign up. So if you go on Instagram and look for Southwood Circle, and you can sign up there.
And you are also enticing people, because it's Valentine's Day weekend. People might know it falls on a Friday, Valentine's this year. So you've got a giveaway that involves local businesses, right?
We do, yes. We're offering draw prizes ranging from chocolates to our headline prize, which is a night for two at the Fort Garry Hotel with chocolate-covered strawberries and sparkling wine delivered to your room, and a breakfast in the morning in their rotunda.
Love that. If this goes well this weekend, do you think there'll be future plans to sort of continue to use the land for skiing and for fat biking, given that the development is obviously a longer project?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We had cross-country ski trails there last year. We hired Alex Mann, who's got amazing race claim to fame and who also designed for the Calgary Olympics mountain bike trails there, who designed mountain bike trails for us along the river. So we've got mountain biking, we have trails in the wintertime, walking, cross-country skiing, fat biking. We have events really all year round. What we're trying to do is encourage people to come out and experience the site. It's been closed for a long time. So now that it's reopening, we want people to come and experience the beauty of nature that's on the site, what we have to offer, encourage them to keep visiting and maybe one day become a resident.
Where can people sign up, just to repeat that information if they want to take part in this?
So go on Instagram and look for Southwood Circle.
Awesome.
At Southwood Circle.
You going to ski this weekend, Greg? I heard you're a cross-country skier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My skis are in the back of my car right now.
Love it. This is, you want the cold weather. Wax them up and get out there, bundle up good. Thank you so much for being up early with us and sharing more about the land and the development and, of course, tied to the event this weekend as well. Thanks for having me. Hope to see you out there. You know what? I haven't cross-country skied in years, but what the heck? Last week I curled. Maybe this week I could cross-country ski. We got to get out and do something, right? There you go. It's great to be outside. Greg Rogers, CEO, and up early with us today of Properties. So the Ski and Fat Bike event is happening from Thursday. In fact, starts tomorrow. It runs through Sunday at Southwood Circle. So that is right at the corner of Sydney Smith and Markham Road, adjacent to the University of Manitoba. Check them out on Instagram if you want to sign up.
A modestly priced hair salon offered a real dumb coupon.
Not $50 off, $50 on.
The city of Vienna posted negative online comments over spectacular photography. And a discount airline embraced their cheap aesthetic.
We call that flying smart class.
Advertising to haters on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen.
6:22 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. I'm RC Marcusa with our team at the show. An extreme cold warning for most of the province does include the city of Winnipeg. Right now it's minus 24 downtown, minus 28 at the airport. With wind chills, we're looking at more around minus 40, folks. Well, coming up next on CBC, you might have heard Heather Wells mentioning our premier. He is in Washington this morning. He is there with other premiers, and they're talking about tariffs. Specifically, though, what Wab Kinew is sending a message around is steel. He's talking about the fact that he's trying to appeal to steel workers in the United States, that what is bad for our workers in Manitoba is also going to be bad for them when it comes to 25% proposed tariff on steel. More than 70% of the steel produced in the city of Selkirk heads south of the border. And as we heard yesterday from the mayor of Selkirk, they're getting ready for tariffs. In less than a month, those tariffs on all steel and aluminum entering the States will go into effect. The 25% tariffs are causing economic uncertainty all across Canada. You might have heard on World Report, Chrystia Freeland, who's running for Liberal leadership, was on CNN last night. So really, there's a hard press from Canada against this. Colin Mang's here to talk a bit about it. He's assistant professor of economics at McMaster University. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So March 12th is the big date. What kind of impact are we seeing already?
So we're already seeing steel orders being cut. American buyers are looking ahead and saying, look, I don't want to pay the extra 25% tax. And with what we heard out of the White House last night, it might be as much as 50%. The 25% general tariffs on steel and aluminum that they're applying to all imports, plus the specific 25% that Donald Trump signed just for Canadian goods a few weeks ago. At those tax rates, American buyers just can't afford Canadian steel.
50%. I mean, I think a lot of people this morning are just going to be stopping. That's a sobering number. How deeply do you feel this is going to affect the industry in the longer term? And I hate to be hyperbolic. Maybe it's not hyperbolic, but I mean, could we even be viable if he slaps 50% on Canadian steel and aluminum?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on how long these tariffs last. Trump has done tariffs on Canadian goods before. From May 2018 to April 2019, he did tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, and that lasted for a year. He also did tariffs on Canadian aluminum for the month of August 2020. That only lasted a month. If these tariffs last for only a month or a couple of months, it's not going to have a big impact up here in Canada. But if it's something that lasts for a much longer period, a year or more, it's going to have a significant impact. In Canada, we produce about 13 million tons of steel. We export about 6 million of that. So roughly just a little bit more than 40% of everything that we make here in Canada that steel gets shipped to the United States specifically. So if we're not able to compete in the American market anymore, our steel industry is going to shrink by about half.
What's the reality of what that means? Obviously, job losses and companies that may have to shutter. But will they shutter or will they move to the States? And is that ultimately Trump's endgame anyway? Come and build your factory here.
Well, that is what he wants. He wants more production to take place in the United States. Steel plants are not something that you can easily move. I mean, you're talking about billions of dollars in investment. Now, what we are seeing is that steel companies in Canada, some of them have started to delay reinvestment in their plants here in Canada because of the uncertainty. I mean, we will still continue to make steel here in Canada. We do have a big domestic market for it. We consume about 7 million tons of the steel that we make. But it will lead to a smaller industry here in Canada if these tariffs stay into effect for a longer period of time.
After the first round of tariffs with Donald Trump in his first presidency term, what did Canada do to insulate ourselves from future tariffs? And can any of that be applied now, or do you think we're in a completely different ballgame given that he's come in with a stronger mandate from the American people?
Yeah, so there's a few different things that we learned from the last time, such as having dollar-for-dollar tariffs on American goods. To send them a message. Look, we do not want a trade war, but if you want to get into one with us, we're willing to fight back. In 2018, we put tariffs on about $16.6 billion worth of American goods. And then in 2020, we put tariffs on about $2.7 billion worth of American imports coming into Canada. The federal government has already talked about having tariffs on American agricultural products because we buy $28 billion worth of farm products from the United States every year. So that's one thing that we could do. The other thing that steel manufacturers have been looking at is upgrading their technology. So a couple of years ago, the federal government put $470 million into a new electric arc furnace. This is a technology that uses electricity rather than the traditional coal-fired method. It cuts greenhouse gas emissions by about 70%. And what that does, it produces a product that we call green steel because it's much more environmentally friendly. And the Europeans, being more environmentally conscious, are really interested in that product. So if we're looking to diversify our potential export markets, adopting the new technology on a broader scale across the country would be a significant option for us. But I think it would take federal funds to encourage the steel manufacturers to do that.
Now, you may not know the answer to this, Colin, but I just want to dig into something that came up here in Manitoba. So when it comes to supply chain issues and tariffs, we were talking to Selkirk yesterday, the city of Selkirk, the mayor, sharing with us, as I said at the beginning, that some 70% of the steel produced there heads south of the border. But they're not selling it necessarily into the States. They are going through the States with the product. So it's part of the supply chain. It may spend some time there to get somewhere else. Or vice versa to come into Manitoba. So my question is, do we know how tariffs are going to be affecting things where the States isn't the end market?
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting issue. So a lot of the steel comes into the United States. Some of it gets shipped back to Canada, either as more refined versions, or a lot of it goes into auto manufacturing. These tariffs are going to be very devastating for the auto industry that relies on this steel. So this is going to push up the cost of cars by a few $1,000s each, cars and trucks for families. This is going to be a pretty significant issue because steel is used in construction. This is going to push up the cost of building large buildings, infrastructure projects. This is going to have pretty widespread repercussions for the American economy, Canadian economy, as well as other economies around the world.
And there's no exemption if it's not your end market. If you're just moving through, there's no exemption. You're still going to be tariffed.
No, that's once it goes into the United States, it's going to be 25% at the border.
Colin Mang, thank you very much for this. Obviously, we've had an ongoing series of interviews. We'll continue to try and understand more and more about what could be happening in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Colin Mang, Assistant Professor of Economics at McMaster University. So still ahead in this hour of the program, we're going to continue talking tariffs, but specifically we're going to be looking at the politics of all of this. And as I mentioned, Wab Kinew's in Washington. We're going to actually hear from him in the news in a moment with Heather. Clear -24 in Winnipeg in the morning commute. Give us a call if you're having any issue out there. 788-3093 is where you can reach Chloe Friesen. Chloe's filling in for Corey this morning, picking up that commuter line and directing the show. Still ahead, we have business news. news, and today we're going to be talking about how people are coping with the high cost of living. There's a new study that shows that a lot of workers who have multiple jobs just still continue to struggle. So stay tuned. That's after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's minus 24. Another morning, another extreme cold warning covering all of southern Manitoba. In Winnipeg today, mostly sunny. A wind chill of minus 36 this morning. The actual high in Winnipeg today will be minus 21. All 13 Canadian premiers are in Washington today, kicking off a joint lobbying effort aimed at convincing the Trump administration to back away from its ongoing tariff threats. Manitoba's Wab Kinew says part of this is about relationship building.
For us, Manitoba, we've got a big steel mill in Selkirk, and so while we have this window of opportunity, we want to make the case. And so one of the things we're doing while we're down here is connecting with the steel workers in the States. We've got a lot of steel workers in Manitoba, and just let's get that message that what benefits that worker in our province benefits the worker in this country as well, too. So trying to make the American-Canadian friendship stronger.
Kinew even took to Instagram walking in the Washington snow, saying Canada won't just extend a warm, hearty handshake. He says they may even help their friends shovel, too. Well, while the premiers are in Washington, the Minister of Public Safety will be on the border in Ontario. David McGuinty trying to demonstrate Canada has not forgotten its commitment to secure the border. Yesterday, the government named Kevin Brousseau as the country's new fentanyl czar. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says there's already a lot of work being done on the fentanyl file.
We have someone who's kind of heading all these efforts, making sure that we have one big voice on that. So I think you'll see action.
Brousseau was the top cop for the RCMP in Manitoba more than a decade ago. Well, extreme cold is putting extra pressure on Winnipeg's downtown overnight warming space at Siloam Mission. Interim CEO Julianne Aitken says the number of people needing help has ballooned because of this long-lasting deep freeze.
We've recently moved from a smaller drop-in actually into our larger drop-in because the needs have grown. So we started seeing under 100 to 130, and now it's up to 180 people, like unique people each night who need a safe place and a warm space.
Aitken says it's not the same people seeking help every night. She says some stay a few nights and then move on. Outreach vans are combing through downtown, looking for people who need shelter. Aitken says the mission is in desperate need of winter clothing, especially mitts and warm socks. She says medical teams have been treating people for frostbite as well. News arrests have been made in the case of Mohammed Abduhali is providing a sense of justice and relief for community members. The 22-year-old man was gunned down last July after playing in a soccer tournament at the soccer complex on Waverley. Winnipeg police say they have now charged 2 men with first-degree murder. They are in custody, and a warrant has been issued for a third suspect. Godi Katembo is president of the Canada African Cup of Nations tournament.
It does not ease up the pain of losing our dear friend, a brother, a fellow teammate, right? But this is kind of bring a sense of kind of addressing there's no place for violence in our province, in our communities.
Katembo hopes the community can continue healing through soccer. He says they have made changes to their events security since last year. They now have metal detectors and security guards on site. Katembo says none of the suspects have ever taken part in his organization's tournaments. A health finance expert says he laughed at an audit's recommendation to Manitoba health authorities. 3 independent audits were released by the province last week. They found most health agencies were regularly in the red between 2019 and 2024. They also recommend any time Shared Health and the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority are in deficit at the end of the quarter, they should find triple the amount in savings. Amin Mawani is a professor at York University who specializes in healthcare administration.
I saw that and I had a chuckle. I mean, that's ridiculous. If that kind of savings could be easy to spot and find, people would have done it in the first place.
Mawani says that recommendation is demanding and hard to enforce in a crisis. All of Canada's living former prime ministers are asking Canadians to fly the national flag this Saturday as a sign of patriotism amid tariff threats from the U.S. Joe Clark, Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, Stephen Harper, and Kim Campbell have signed a joint letter.
On big issues, we tend to come together. This is the same thing that over the last few weeks with the statements that President Trump has made, there's been a lot of closing ranks. So this is an opportunity for us to come together and say there are some issues where we're all Canadian.
This Saturday is Flag Day, an annual holiday to mark the first time the red and white maple leaf flag was raised on Parliament Hill in 1965. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, whilst we're running this Show Us Your Winter contest for a chance to win all this CBC swag, and it's just like the nicest. I love this idea. I can take no credit for it. It was somebody else on our team, but we're not just asking you to show us, how you survive winter outside, but we're also acknowledging that some people just don't bother. So what's really nice is we're getting all these videos of people making homemade borscht and people like covered in their kittens and talking about how they nap and what time of day. Like I just
baking bread.
Yeah. Like I kind of just love the acknowledgement of that, and other people just doing indoor things with the family. Someone sent a photo of their dinner table full of different people, and they said they host international students during the and I don't know if it's just for meals. I haven't read it that deeply yet, or if it's actually hosting as in living and billeting. But they said that warms up their winter, and they do that and enjoy it during the school year, but during the winter months.
That's a great thing to do,
right? I just thought it's so great. What a great contest! So still ahead, we are going to be sharing some of those entries, by the way, and we will also be interviewing someone who does something special in her classroom to enjoy winter, survive winter, and so that's coming up still in Information Radio. Abby Adiemi is here first, though, because this is our way of helping you feel good about what Abby's about to say, because this is serious stuff this morning.
Yeah, that's true. The extreme cold warnings remain in effect across southern Manitoba today. That cold snap continues with wind chills in the valleys of -40 and even colder. Now, while it may be sunny today in most of the regions, you should expect dangerously cold conditions throughout the day, with temperatures remaining bitterly cold even in the afternoon period, where you see that sun really bright up there. Conditions in Winnipeg and surrounding area this time, we're looking at temperatures around -24, 25 with clear skies out there. Though we have sunshine in the forecast today, but it's going to be pretty cold outside. The wind chill this morning, if you're stepping outside and making that transition from one bus to another, it's going to feel like -36 this morning. And then heading home tonight, during your commute home, you'll feel the temperature drop to around -33, with the wind chill getting close to -43. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley regions. Sunny skies, highs around -22. Heading west to Brandon, currently it is -33 in that part of the province. Partly cloudy skies, we're seeing the wind chill this morning makes it feel like -41. And in the afternoon period, it's going to drop down to around -33, though it returns again in the evening. It's going to feel like -46 tonight. So wind chill, frostbite is a thing. For Dauphin and the Parkland region, temperatures around -28, -29 at this time. Though it's partly cloudy there, once you get into the morning, you see sunny skies. The wind chill this morning will feel like -42. In the afternoon, it feels like it warms up, and then overnight it drops back to -41. In the Interlake region, we're seeing temperatures around -31 in Gimli. Cloudy conditions we're seeing at this time. However, today will be sunny, but expect the wind chill to feel like -36 this morning. In the Park, Flin Flon, both towns seeing temperatures close to -30 at this time. Clear skies you have. Expect sunny but bitterly cold conditions, with wind chills making it feel close to -41. For Thompson Churchill, we're seeing temperatures between -38 and -34, and the wind chills around -40, -41.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's get to the morning commute with Chloe Friesen.
Hello. Yeah, no calls quite yet to the commuter line. It's been fairly quiet. Highways are looking good, but of course, if you do see something or experience some road conditions that you think your fellow commuters should know about, I would love to hear from you on our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Chloe. Let's get to Crystalie Ramlakan, who is here with our business news. Good morning, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with how people are coping with the high cost of living, because I understand you actually have some new data to share with us.
Yeah, so a new study shows many workers who have multiple jobs are still struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. ADP Research surveyed 38,000 working adults globally this past summer across roughly 36 markets, and it found almost a quarter of respondents had 2 or more jobs. And among those workers with 2 jobs, about 6 in 10 said they live paycheck to paycheck. And here in Canada, the survey shows about half of those with 2 jobs do it to cover necessary expenses. So more than half of Canadians working 3 jobs say they are doing it to build their savings or retirement funds. And while affordability was the top reason for multiple jobs, 16% of respondents said there were fewer full-time job opportunities, which pushed them to work multiple jobs. And overall, the survey found 56% of working Canadians were living paycheck to paycheck.
Let's go to another story. The auto industry says that U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum could drive up the cost of cars. We actually just had a full interview that partially dealt with this, but what are the details of what the industry leaders are saying?
Yeah, so industry leaders say tariffs on imports could wreak havoc on American auto manufacturing and make vehicles more expensive for car buyers, even though Trump says this is all being done to help the industry. So experts say tariffs on crucial products coming from outside of the U.S. places pressure on domestic sourcing. And the basic rules of supply and demand could drive up costs. Steel producers will have to find ways to increase capacity, and aluminum and steel might be in short supply, driving up costs. So experts say producing vehicles has a lot of moving parts, and raising the price of what is among the most important components of the vehicle is only going to raise the price of an already expensive product. And the CEO of Ford is also warning that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico would give a price advantage to overseas rivals. So speaking at an investors conference yesterday, CEO James Farley said tariffs are creating cost and chaos for the automaker, which makes cars around the world. He said a 25% tariff would blow a hole in the U.S. industry that we have never seen. So for decades, Canada and the United States have had free trade, and the agreement renegotiated in Trump's first term in office has allowed the auto industry to become highly integrated and efficient, with some vehicle parts crossing the border 6 times before a vehicle is completed. And experts say any import tax would affect that integrated industry. So, Canadian plants run by Ford, GM, Stellantis, Honda, and Toyota made a total of 1.5 million vehicles, passenger vehicles, in 2023 and employed 128,000 people making vehicles and parts. And vehicles are Canada's most valuable, our second most valuable export, worth $51 billion in 2023. And about 93% of this is sent to the U.S., and that's according to the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association.
I really appreciate that stat you shared, that a vehicle can cross the border back and forth 6 times.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And before we look at numbers this morning, Coca-Cola says it's going to make a change if aluminum tariffs do take effect here.
Yes, so Coca-Cola's CEO says the company will sell more soda in plastic bottles instead. And the company says if one package increases in input costs, it will continue with other packaging to meet its strategies around affordability and ensuring consumer demand. CEO James Quincy says the company buys some aluminum from Canada, but did downplay the financial hit from tariffs. He said the company could find domestic aluminum sources, but he would have to increase prices for customers. Now, aluminum can be recycled over and over again and is one of the most commonly recycled materials. And in recent years, the company has shifted to adding more aluminum packaging. And even though the lightweight plastic used can be easily recycled, it is recycled at a lower rate than aluminum. And Coca-Cola has been named the world's worst polluter by Greenpeace for 6 straight years for its single-use plastic usage. So just 2 months ago, Coca-Cola slashed its sustainability goals. The beverage giant now aims to use 35 to 40% recycled material in packaging by 2035, down from its prior target of 50% recycled material by 2030.
The irony, of course, is Americans can soon be drinking Coke out of plastic straws again because Donald Trump's going back on that, right?
That as well, yeah.
Markets today, what's happening so far?
So in Europe, stocks are slightly higher. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is down. In Asia, markets are mostly on the rise. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all up. Oil is down 84 cents to $72.48 US per barrel. Gold is down $16.80 to $2,880.60 US per ounce. And the dollar is down just over a tenth of a cent to 69.9 cents US.
All right, Crystal Ramlakam, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's our business report on CBC's Information Radio. Minus 24 right now in Winnipeg, and at the airport it's minus 28. Brandon's mainly clear, minus 32, and Thompson, without the wind chill factored in, is minus 39. Extreme cold warning for all of the south right now. And you know the old joke in Manitoba, right? It's a dry cold. Well, that actually isn't just a joke. It's true, but it also means that our skin just gets crazy dry. I don't know about you, but as soon as you put on some lotion, it's like it's over. I need some more. Layer it up over and over all day. So what's the best way to tackle dry skin in winter weather? Dr. Susan Pullman this morning, dermatologist and associate professor in dermatology department at University of Calgary, has a couple of tips.
One thing that people don't know maybe is that our own bodies produce natural moisturizing factor to adapt to the cold, dry climate. It's actually a product that's produced in the skin when conditions are good. So when what most people don't know is certain things change the pH of the skin, like harsh soaps, so that machinery can't work. Those enzymes can't work if the pH of the skin is off. And so that's one of the things I counsel my patients on, is to avoid kind of fragranced, harsh soaps because they make the skin more basic, and then the skin barrier becomes compromised. And that can lead to skin conditions like winter itch and worsening of skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis. Essentially, most skin problems are caused by a disruption of the skin barrier and actually halting of the production of that natural moisturizing factor. So looking for a soap that is fragrance-free or designed for sensitive skin is a good thing to do. It's also important to avoid soap on your whole body. You can just use it on the smelly parts, and some people don't use soap at all. But I think that's just one thing that we can talk about in terms of how to battle the dry skin in the winter. I think another thing is to avoid long, hot showers. But more importantly, if you do like a nice warm hot shower, is to seal the moisture in after the shower or the bath with moisturizing cream. A lot of people reach for lotion. They don't realize that lotions contain water. So something in a pump is not as good as something in a tube or a tub. So look for a cream because it's more hydrating to the skin. And if you apply that immediately after the shower, it actually seals in the moisture. And I tell people to put a humidifier in their room or to hang their clothes to dry in their room because that's a guaranteed 7 or 8 hours of moisture in the air around you.
Some good ideas in there, right? Although I was hearing maybe, I know this is tongue-in-cheek, right? But take fewer showers. Use less of that harsh soap. Stay stinky, everyone. I'm just kidding. Yeah, some really good ideas in there, actually, especially about hanging the clothes and also about paying attention to cream versus lotion and what you're buying there. It is cold. Your skin's going to be dry. That's Dr. Susan Pullman, an associate professor in dermatology at the University of Calgary's Department of Medicine.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter.
Canada will be responding
as they happen.
We must put Canada first.
At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
Stream anytime. CBC News.
It is right now 10 to 7 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube, speaking of streaming. Also want to mention that we have a podcast, and so it's called This is Manitoba, and it is samples of things from the show stitched together. But in case you missed the show or in case you're looking to sort of consume the show in a different way, check it out. It's on YouTube. It's also visual. 20 minutes daily. This is Manitoba. And we can tell you that in Manitoba this morning, it should be a good drive. Yesterday I was out and about, and when it's this cold, that's the benefit, right? Often the highways are just dry and clear. So be careful for black ice. But other than that, you should have a pretty decent drive today. Check 511 before you're heading out and call us if you have any issues that you want to update on the commuter line. Well, next on the show, as I mentioned, we're going to continue talking tariffs this hour, but this time through the actual political point of view of what's happening. You've been hearing that all 13 of Canada's premiers, including Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, are in Washington, D.C. today. They're meeting with U.S. politicians to talk trade and tariffs. This is the first time all of Canada's premiers traveled together on a joint mission. There's a sense of urgency, though, with U.S. President Donald Trump announcing Monday he's slapping 25% duties on Canadian aluminum and steel coming into the States. And now he's made it clear that is on top of the threatened tariffs on all Canadian goods that could come in less than a month. So do the math. We're talking 50% now. Nelson Wiseman's here to discuss the politics, Professor Emeritus in Political Science at the University of Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what is your sense of how Washington politicians are viewing this delegation? Because we're looking at it through our Canadian lens. You know, first-time premiers have all gone together. Obviously a big deal. But how's it been being received by Washington politicians?
I think what's most striking today is that if you look at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, the leading national papers in the United States, there isn't any mention whatsoever of the premiers being in Washington. So this is a major story in Canada. All the premiers getting together. When has that ever happened in Canadian history where all the premiers have visited Washington at the same time? With a common objective. But in the United States, it doesn't resonate. And there are a number of reasons for this. People recognize, policymakers, that the decisions about the border and about trade, international trade, are made by federal governments, by national governments. They'll be made by Ottawa and Washington. And moreover, when you get to Washington, you don't have consensus there. Nobody knows what Donald Trump will do from 1 minute to the next. Now, when you introduced the item, Marcy, what caught my ear is you talked about these tariffs being imposed by the United States. But actually, when you read the fine print, you see that the tariffs are being projected for dates in the future. We haven't had any tariffs now. And what we were told on February the 3rd is that the tariffs are being postponed until March 4th. What we were told yesterday is, there will be additional tariffs on aluminum and steel, as you pointed out. But those will come on March the 12th. Well, look, when Trump ran for office, virtually every day on the campaign trail, he said he was going to impose tariffs on his first day in office. He signed dozens of executive orders. He didn't sign one on that. When asked about it, he said that's coming on February the 1st.
So I want to just interject and return to the premiers then. If they're not getting traction, if everyone knows this is coming, not government to government even necessarily, but from Trump, then what is your sense of these high-level meetings? Can you walk through what the premiers are going to be doing and then maybe speak to the fact of how they do make it effective?
Well, different premiers will end up talking to different people. I don't know what meetings Wab Kinew has set up in the United States. That would be a good question to put to the premier's office. And no doubt, they are circulating. I don't know how many meetings were prearranged. I believe some were. And I suspect a lot of the people they will talk to will simply be political staffers. Because the Congress people are very busy. But there are some significant meetings. Ford was co-hosting yesterday a reception with the governor, Kevin Cramer, a senior Republican senator from North Dakota. a state bordering Manitoba. I suspect Wab Kinew was at the reception and spoke to Kramer. I don't know who else was at that reception. And maybe it was just mainly other premiers. Maybe there were another 2-3 senators. But what influence have the senators had on Trump up to now? The takeaway I take from following American media is that Americans are very favorably disposed to Canada, and that Congress, including its Republicans, don't want tariffs imposed on Canada, but they defer to Trump. And, well, we'll see what happens.
I want to leave time for 2 more questions. So the first is on the premiers, and then I need to talk about the fentanyl czar. So on the premiers still, I'm just curious, when we talk about unification of the different premiers, of course we know that Danielle Smith of Alberta has been questioned for how steady she is with that. What is the possibility of her splitting with the group, in your view?
Oh, there's an excellent possibility. And for the same reason that there was before the group got united, which is the conservative politicians in Canada are divided. And that's because they represent their provincial interests. Scott Moe of Saskatchewan and Danielle Smith of Alberta don't want any Canadian tariffs imposed on Canadian oil and gas that's exported to the United States because they produce oil and gas. However, once Trump announced that he was going to impose 25% tariffs across the board, except for oil and gas at 10%, Danielle Smith and Scott Moe changed their positions.
So you think there's a possibility, that they could split. And just briefly, I need to turn to the fentanyl czar here because Kevin Brousseau served in the RCMP for 20 years. He was Deputy Commissioner and Commanding Officer in Manitoba from 2012 to 2016. So people here may know his name. He has been announced as the new fentanyl czar. What do you think that will, will that resonate in these meetings with the premiers that, saying we have this fentanyl czar?
Well, it resonated in one way, although I think the appointment really is just strictly symbolic. I don't think it'll affect fentanyl at all. It was because in their conversations on February the 3rd between Trump and the president of Mexico, she said she would send 10,000 soldiers to the border. When Trump then spoke to Trudeau and asked him to do the same thing, Trump is impressed by military deployments. Trudeau said, I don't have 10,000 soldiers. So they agreed they would talk again at 3 p.m. And Trump said, okay, appoint the fentanyl czar so I can boast about it on Fox TV, that we're fighting this together, and also put a couple of $100 million into a joint strike force on fentanyl.
And that's
Canada's
quotable information that he said this to the Prime Minister? I hadn't heard that. You're quoting?
It is according to today's, no, that precisely isn't there, but we know that they had 2 conversations, and the first one didn't satisfy that requirement.
Okay, I wasn't sure what the CBC journalism was on that. So
yeah, my source is the Wall Street Journal.
All right, Nelson, thank you very much for your analysis of all of this. We're about to hear World Report, so and move to headlines, but we appreciate having you on for the analysis.
Thank you, Marcy.
Nelson Wiseman, Professor Emeritus in Political Science at the University of Toronto. So let's first, before national news, go to Heather for local headlines.
Good morning. Well, this extreme cold is putting extra pressure on Winnipeg's downtown overnight warming space at Siloam Mission. The interim CEO there says the number of people needing help has ballooned to close to 200 because of this long-lasting deep freeze. And the head of Manitoba's Nurses Union calls a health authority's exclusion from an audit unfair. The health authority that was excluded was Southern Health, the Southern Health region. And Darlene Jackson says there's more to the story. She wants to know why the province won't look into how many nursing shifts and positions are sitting unfilled in Southern Health. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
Thanks.
Minus 24 in Winnipeg feels like minus 28. It is minus 28 at the airport. With wind chill, it's going to feel more like minus 40. And that's not just Winnipeg. Extreme cold warning for all of southern Manitoba. 788-3093 if you see anything on the commute. It's been quiet so far. In the next hour of the show, We are going to have more follow-up to our conversation with a nurse earlier this week who works frontline at HSC in the emergency department. We're going to delve into the role of social workers in reducing wait times, specifically by helping people who might be in the waiting room because they actually need to be dealt with houselessness.
Today on The Current.
There are a lot of people that want to do family medicine. They just don't see it as an attractive option at this point.
Communities across Canada are desperate to attract doctors and trying all sorts of different ways to do that. Some cities are hiring family physicians as employees and taking over their paperwork, leaving the doctor more time to see patients. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
I do not believe that Canada is being sincerely threatened by anyone today. But when people covet our country, our resources, Canadians are prepared to take a very strong stand in defense of who we are and our country.
Defense Minister Bill Blair says he will not tolerate anyone saying Canada is not a real country or the 51st state, and he disputes claims Canada cannot defend itself.
In all the years that we have been a member of NATO, Canada is never a country that has ever had to ask for help or been threatened by our alliances. That's not really the relationship that Canada has with the nations of the world. But we've been there for others, and every time our allies and our friends needed us, we were there.
Blair was speaking this morning in Brussels just after he and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with NATO's Secretary General. NATO and Canada's defense spending is a source of friction with U.S. President Donald Trump. He frequently brings it up when he threatens Canada with more tariffs. But today the premiers are hoping to change that conversation. For the first time ever, all 13 of the provincial and territorial leaders are in Washington at the same time. Kate McKenna has more on their anti-tariff push.
The president has an agenda and he's moving fast.
Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston acknowledges the road ahead might be bumpy as President Donald Trump appears set on tariffs.
We just want to make sure that he understands the importance of the relationship, that the tariffs can make things more expensive for Nova Scotians, for Canadians, but also for Americans.
All 13 premiers are in Washington today. They'll be holding a series of meetings trying to convince American movers and shakers that tariffs are painful and unnecessary. But Trump's position appears to have hardened. This week he announced a global tariff on steel and aluminum set to take effect mid-March, and he's still threatening a 25% blanket tariff on all Canadian goods. A White House official speaking on background says if both tariffs go ahead, they'd be stacked, resulting in a 50% levy on Canadian steel and aluminum. Wab Kinew is the Premier of Manitoba.
So one of the things we're doing while we're down here is connecting with the steelworkers in the States. We've got a lot of steelworkers in Manitoba, and just let's get that message that what benefits that worker in our province benefits the worker in this country as well, too.
Whether that message makes a difference remains to be seen. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc is also in Washington today, meeting with someone central to Trump's tariff agenda, Secretary of Commerce nominee Howard Lutnick. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Washington.
While the premiers are in Washington, the Minister of Public Safety will be on the border in Ontario. David McGuinty is trying to demonstrate Canada has not forgotten its commitment to secure the border. Yesterday, the government named Kevin Brosseau as the country's new fentanyl czar. And Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says there is already a lot of work being done on the fentanyl file.
We have someone who's kind of heading all these efforts, making sure that we have one big voice on that. So I think you'll see action.
Brosseau is the former deputy commissioner of the RCMP. The government says his experience as a Mountie has given him expertise in drug trafficking, organized crime networks, and other national security threats. Tensions are high in Gaza. Israel and Hamas continue to accuse each other of violating a fragile ceasefire. The clock is ticking towards a deadline of noon Saturday. Both U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are demanding the release of Israeli hostages. If Hamas refuses, the war in Gaza will resume. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is following developments from Jerusalem.
Life is returning to the muddy streets of Gaza. Cars and donkey carts, people buying food. But there's still not enough aid getting in, not enough temporary housing or machinery to clear rubble. And for that, Hamas blames Israeli restrictions. That, says spokesman Hazem Kasmeh, is one reason the group has threatened to suspend the release of hostages. If Israel lifts the restrictions, he says, Hamas will hand over the next hostages on time. If that group isn't released on Saturday, Israel's promised more intense fighting, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seeming to echo U.S. President Donald Trump's demand that all hostages be released at once, ahead of schedule. If Hamas doesn't return our hostages by Saturday noon, Netanyahu said in a video address, the ceasefire will end, though he's been vague on how many hostages he expects. All of this has raised tensions among hostage families protesting with signs that read, "Don't blow the deal," and among the majority of Israelis who are desperate to see the remaining 76 hostages freed.
You must release them, I would like to say, yesterday. We can fight the Hamas later.
Mediators from Qatar and Egypt are scrambling to save the ceasefire. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Estonian foreign intelligence says China is playing a significant role in Russian military drone production. Some critical components of the drones are made in Western countries and subject to sanctions. According to Estonian intelligence, China has essentially become a smuggling hub, helping Russia work around the sanctions to get the high-tech parts it needs. The report suggests as much as 80% of these military drone components now reach Russia through China. The United Nations Human Rights Office estimates as many as 1,400 people were killed last summer in Bangladesh. It all happened in a period of just 6 weeks during student-led protests against the now ousted prime minister. A UN team was deployed to Bangladesh to investigate. Volker Turk is the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. He says the report shows security and intelligence services systematically violated the protesters' rights.
These include hundreds of extrajudicial killings, extensive arbitrary arrest and detention, and torture and ill treatment, including of children, as well as gender-based violence.
Turk says authorities' actions could amount to crimes against humanity, and in some cases it would be better to refer it to the International Criminal Court. Ottawa's only English-speaking college is cutting dozens of programs. Algonquin College says it's facing unprecedented financial challenges, and it says part of the problem is recent changes to federal immigration numbers. David Fraser reports.
What project is this for?
Students and staff at Algonquin College learned of the cuts this week.
It has been chaotic, unfortunate and difficult.
Martin Lee teaches in the Applied Technology Department.
This is a G8 capital, and we are losing valuable programs. The future of Ontario's workforce is being cut here.
The proposed cuts impact the business, hospitality, creative arts, and media departments. If the Board of Governors approves the plan on February 24th, these programs will stop admitting new students this fall. Algonquin blames the cuts on a federal cap on international student permits. About 20% fewer international students are expected at Algonquin this year, even fewer next year. President Claude Brûlé.
It's less attractive for international students to come and study in those programs, knowing that they would have to return home afterward. They will not be able to stay and work for a few years.
The college says a province-wide tuition freeze is another financial strain on its bottom line. Just last month, Algonquin recommended shutting down its Perth campus by 2026, and in Kingston, 200 kilometers away, St. Lawrence College also announced layoffs of dozens of employees. Across Ontario, colleges are suspending programs that have been reliant on higher tuition from international students to balance their budgets. David Fraser, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Westminster Kennel Club has named a new champ, and you could say this year's Best in Show is the Full Monty.
I choose the giant schnauzer.
Oh, Monty! He did it! 3 years and he finally wins Best in Show. What an incredible
Monty is a regal boy with an all-black coat and a long beard. The giant schnauzer stands almost as high as his owner's hip, and he beat out more than 2,500 dogs from across the United States who competed in the dog show. This award is considered the most prestigious prize in the American dog show world. The dogs are judged according to how closely they match the ideal for their breed. You can see pictures of Monty on our website, cbcnews.ca. And that is the latest from World Report. 10 minutes is all it takes to get the news you need from CBC. Why not make it a habit? Follow World Report today, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, hopefully you've got some something to cover up the doggy paws this morning if you're walking your dog in Manitoba. We've got an extreme cold warning across all of the south. Welcome to Wednesday morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Well, this half hour on the program, are minerals the key to Manitoba's economic trade power in the face of a possible U.S. tariffs? We're going to meet a geologist who says Manitoba's mineral rich, and that could work to our advantage. And this builds on a story that we had on yesterday, so stay tuned for that. Also this hour on the program, we're going to meet a young Winnipegger who says he's made Tourette syndrome his superpower. So stay tuned for that. We'll hear more what it's like for him living with the syndrome. And then at 10 to 8 this morning, more follow-up to our conversation earlier this week with a nurse about working conditions and patient care at the ER at the Health Sciences Centre. Today, we delve into the role of social workers in the ER. The nurse was talking about whether or not more social workers might help with reducing wait times, and that's because maybe they would be there to help with the growing numbers of those who are houseless and present to the ER. So stay tuned. We're going to have a conversation all about that. That's just around 8 o'clock here, 10 to 8. Right now, it is 7:11 a.m. Let's return to politics and return to where our premier is today. Heather Wells joins us this morning with headlines.
Good morning. Yes, all of Canada's premiers are in Washington today for that joint lobbying effort to convince the Trump administration to back away from its ongoing tariff threats. And as you mentioned, Manitoba's Wab Kinew is there.
I'm a big believer in the old adage, relate before you negotiate.
Kinew calls this a window of opportunity to connect with steelworkers in America as well, letting them know what benefits Manitoba steelworkers benefits them too. Close to 200 people have spent the night in a downtown Winnipeg warming shelter this week trying to escape this extended deep freeze. Siloam Mission says it recently added more space to its overnight warming area because of a spike in demand. It says its outreach vans are patrolling downtown, and medical teams have also been treating people for frostbite. So we'll hear more from Siloam Mission's interim CEO coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Man, yeah, it's very dangerous cold out there. Yesterday, I was driving Abby up to Lockport. I had to pick something up there, and I was going over the bridge, of course, on 44, and looking at all of these super happy people out in the cold, of course, that were fishing. Lots of shacks, fishing shacks, ice fishing shacks out on the ice right now. So I haven't done that in years. I don't know that I've ever actually, I've done it as sort of to learn how to do it, see how to do it, report on it. I've never actually sat though in an ice fishing shack and pulled a fish out. Have you?
I wonder what it feels like.
Yeah, it'd be really fun, I bet. Yeah. You're just chilling out there. Pardon the pun. All right, let's get to the actual numbers in the forecast today.
Yeah, extreme cold actually gripping the province this morning. We have that cold warnings still in place for southern Manitoba. Most of the regions will be feeling the wind chill of minus 40 or even colder this morning. In Winnipeg, we're looking at temperatures around minus 25 at this time. Clear skies we're seeing out there. Expect sunny weather today with light breeze. It will stay cold with our highs around minus 21. However, the wind chill is going to make it feel like minus 36 this morning. Be careful, frostbite can happen quickly, so prepare for that. And then tonight, a few clouds will roll in. Temperatures will drop to around minus 33. Wind chill overnight minus 43. Across the region, extreme cold, dangerous wind chills. The sun will definitely make its presence felt, but the north will be seeing colder temperatures. more than what the south is seeing. We're seeing 43s and 44s, minus 43s and minus 44s in the northern parts of the province. But for Winnipeg, we are at minus 25 at this time.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Abby Adiyemi with our weather. And now Chloe Friesen's got your commute.
Good morning. We're looking at King Edward and Wellington. There is a collision with emergency crews currently blocking your southbound curb and middle lanes, and your eastbound right yield lane is also blocked. So if you're heading southbound on King Edward, keep left to pass. If you're heading eastbound, just use alternate routes. Again, that's King Edward and Wellington. You might want to avoid that intersection this morning. If you have any updates or anything else is getting in your way, call our commuter line at 204-788-3093.
Well, yesterday we heard from a former NDP MLA and cabinet minister in Manitoba about the province's economic power in the face of U.S. tariff threats. Jim Rondo spent 17 years in office. He was Minister of Science, Technology, Energy and Mines. Now, in part, he said it's time for Manitoba to start withholding our minerals, he said, from the States and sending those resources elsewhere. Here's a clip.
Tantalum is produced in Manitoba. It's a critical mineral, very rare mineral. And it's needed. It's a critical mineral. Well, we have 5 or 6 of these. I found out when I was Minister of Mines, and most of them go straight to the United States. And then from there, they get produced into final products. I think what we do is we don't try to fight a bully by fighting up a bully on their own terms. I think what we have to do is look at our strengths. Our strengths are these critical minerals that can't be replicated. And so what we do is we say, we're going to stop these things, the 5 or 6 major critical minerals that Canada only produces, and stop them.
So in that clip, we heard Rondo talking about Canada producing 5 critical minerals, Manitoba also producing tantalum. But what exactly are all of these minerals? And let's elaborate on how valuable they are. Mustafa Fayek is with us to talk about it, a professor emeritus in the University of Manitoba's Department of Earth Sciences. We've reached him actually in Arizona because he's attending a mineral conference. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So,
thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. Let's just walk through this for people that, may not have really leaned much into what we produce here, what we have naturally producing. What are some of the top minerals that are found here in Manitoba?
So in the summer of 2023, the province of Manitoba published its critical minerals strategy, prioritizing 4 critical elements: lithium, copper, nickel, and silica. And these are the top elements that the Manitoba produces.
And Jim Rondo was referencing tantalum. What exactly is that?
So tantalum and cesium are actually byproducts of lithium production. They're produced from the Tanco mine, and actually the Tanco mine is one of the largest producers of cesium in the world.
What is it used for, tantalum?
So tantalum is usually used to produce electronic components called capacitors. They are used in cell phones, laptops, various other electronics.
And it's a hard metal, is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Hard and lustrous, I understand, and it's corrosion resistant. If I'm thinking.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Can you elaborate on some of the other minerals that you mentioned? You were saying lithium, copper, silica, for example, and where they're most commonly used.
So lithium, of course, is generally used in batteries. So lithium batteries. Nickel is also used in batteries and for EVs. So nickel cadmium batteries, and copper is generally used to make copper wires, which are used in electric motors, and silica is generally used for solar panels.
Silica obviously has been in the news as well because there's a number of different ways to mine it. So there's companies that are looking at that here. Right. Can you tell us, sort of, when you look at our province, why Manitoba is so mineral rich?
Okay. So Manitoba has a diverse geology. And this is the reason why we have a number of critical minerals or critical metals in the province. So in a very general way, along the eastern part of the province, you get a lot of lithium and cesium and tantalum deposits. And around Thompson, Snow Lake, Flin Flon, and Lynn Lake, you get a lot of the copper and nickel deposits. So that's just simply based on the geology. Although you do get some lithium deposits near Snow Lake.
How do you think that we can better use that to our advantage, the fact that we are mineral rich?
Yeah, so working with local communities, government work, Indigenous communities, we can develop these properties so they can become producers of these critical elements, just as TANCO has been doing so for decades.
As the tariff war with the United States continues to play out, and I know you're here to talk about minerals and not politics, but I wonder what you're going to be watching for when it does come to minerals and their role in this and where they will be raised in the discussions.
Yeah, so I mean, Canada and Manitoba in particular, is endowed in all these critical elements and critical minerals. And of course, Canada is a very stable country, has a great economy, a stable government, and so it's a prime source for all these critical elements for any country, U.S. or globally.
Thank you very much for being with us, Mustafa, and walking us through some of the basic understandings of minerals that are produced here naturally. Appreciate having you on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
That is Mustafa Fayak, Professor Emeritus in the University of Manitoba's Department of Earth Sciences.
Have you visited CBC's Being Black in Canada website? It's an online platform to explore the stories and experiences of Black Canadians across the country. A space for news, documentaries, arts and culture, Black achievement in sports, and so much more. Celebrating a uniquely Canadian perspective on Black issues with the cultural moments that matter to Black Canadians. Visit cbc.ca/beingblack-in-Canada.
So let's talk about the 2025 Juno nominees. The list came out yesterday. You might have heard Lorena McKinnon on Up to Speed, who was nominated and said that the album she's nominated for was kind of a second thought, I think she said. It was like she casually did this and boom. You're talented when. Also on the list of nominees for Manitoba, Boy Golden, Jocelyn Gould, James Ennis, Big Dave McLean, The Secret Beach, Sebastian Gaskin, and Jordan St. Cyr. So lots of wonderful nominees in music to celebrate. The 2025 Junos will be handed out in March. And also, of course, across the country, we're celebrating music, including Calgary's Tate McRae and Ontario country singer Josh Ross. They lead the pack with 5 nominations each. They're followed by The Weeknd and Shawn Mendes, who are up for 4 Junos apiece. And there are more than 100 artists receiving their very first Juno nods this year. And one of those we're about to play. This is Nemesis. The debut album has the Palestinian Canadian singer up for 3 Juno Awards this year. The tune's called Stick of Gum.
I swear if I showed you a song I made, you'd say it's not your taste. If anyone else but me wrote it, it's a masterpiece. Everything you do for love, just double it and pass it back. Go home. Someone tell me, are you capable to reciprocate? No matter how high or heavy the take, a stick of gum or dynamite, you could plead guilty and I will do the Is it healthy or is it just familiar to me? Self-worth by validation, that's my philosophy. No need for you to reciprocate, no matter how high or heavy the take. A stick of gum into dynamite, you could plead guilty and I will do the time.
Stick a Gum by Nemesis receiving her first Juno nods this year. For a full list of Juno nominees, head to cbc.ca music and / Junos. Vancouver, by the way, is where the Junos are going to be this year. March 30th is the date, and Michael Bublé is going to be hosting. So it is right now coming up to sports at 7:25 a.m. on Information Radio, and time for sports with Khalil Hassanali, who's in again for Scott Regehr this morning. Hey, Khalil.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So we don't have to wait any longer. A puck drop is here for the Four Nations tournament. It's Canada tonight versus Sweden.
Yeah, been a long couple of days without hockey action for the men as countries practice, got to know each other. And this has been really helpful for Josh Morrissey, the Jets defenseman. Now it's go time. No room for error, because you're only guaranteed 3 games, one against each country. Saturday, or so we got today against Sweden, Saturday against the U.S., and Monday coming up against Finland. Jordan Binnington is going to be in net for Canada. That was confirmed yesterday. He hasn't been a world beater for St. Louis this year. In fact, of all these starting Canadian goalies in the NHL, Binnington actually has the worst save percentage. But coach from Canada, John Cooper, says he has all the tools to be the guy for the red and white.
Naturally, he was really excited. He's a confident kid, and he wants to be in that spot. And this wasn't sitting here saying this decision was made months ago. There's a lot gone into this decision, but this kid's played in some huge moments and some big games, and that kid's got fire in the belly. He's a competitor, and we're really confident in him.
Tonight's opponent for Canada, Sweden, like always, solid from top to bottom. Their defensemen, some of the best in the NHL. They can score with the best of them, and their goaltending is elite. But this is, Marcy, what makes sports so fun. Yeah, best on best tournaments, nothing taken for granted, and you have to be your very best in order to win.
Now let's go to another story. After nearly 9 months, one of the best female hockey players in the world made her return to the ice last night.
Natalie Spooner was back in the Toronto Scepters lineup for the first time since May when she suffered a knee injury in the playoffs last season. Spooner was the PWHL's MVP in their inaugural year, besting everyone in goals and points. And her return against Minnesota sure was exciting as well. The Scepters scored with 4 seconds to go in overtime to get the win. After the game, Spooner was able to put her time away from hockey into context.
Definitely an adjustment, and I think it will take a few games to get really back feeling like myself. Coming back from pregnancy, I kind of had a similar experience, and having that, I can kind of give myself grace. And I would say the first period definitely didn't feel great, but in the second period, I thought I settled in a little bit more. I got a lot to work on still, could feel it out there already. So hopefully after a few games, I kind of get back to that timing and that rhythm of the game.
One more home game for the Scepters before they head out west to continue their takeover tour. There's 2 aspects to this tour, Marcy. Obviously, one, getting the game in front of as many eyes as possible, but also to gauge interest for possible future expansion as well.
And the Grey Cup is in Winnipeg this year. Just looking ahead to November already, but I know I'm way ahead of myself. CFL free agency just opened yesterday. What are your takeaways about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers?
It looks like they're going to be a very different team than the one we saw last year. 6 signings on day one. The biggest probably being running back and return specialist Peyton Logan. Last season, Winnipeg rotated through several returners. None of them really stood out. The Blue and Gold ranked second last in the league in both punt and kick returns. Logan will give them a primary weapon this season while also serving as more than a capable running back as well. The team also brought in receivers Jarrett Stearns, Reggie White, and Gavin Cobb. White is probably the highest profile of the trio and could be challenging for a starting role come training camp. Of course, none of these will dampen the biggest news, the departures of wideouts Drew Wolotarski and Kenny Lawler. Both of them left for the Ticats. Just over 100 days, Marcy, until the first preseason game for Winnipeg. So maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit too, but that doesn't happen before the draft, which comes up in April.
All right. Thanks, Khalil.
Okay, thank you so much.
That is Khalil Hassanali with Morning Sports Today, filling in once again for Scott Regehr. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. Kevin Ipatebo, our YouTube producer. Chloe Friesen filling in for Corey Funk this morning, directing the show, and we're covering the commute. We'll hear from her after the news. And we'll also hear from Addie Yemi, who is our technical producer on InfoRad and covers your forecast. Speaking of which, that extreme cold warning extends across most of southern Manitoba, also includes actually all of southern Manitoba, and does include Winnipeg as well. Coming up after Heather's Newscast at 7:30. We have another installment of our special series of items from the CREATE program out of Sisler High School. And this morning, we're going to meet a young man with Tourette syndrome who's breaking barriers. So we'll have his story coming up. And then also still ahead in this half hour of the program, could more social workers in the emergency room at HSC help patient care at Manitoba's busiest hospital? We're going to hear from a guest who thinks so, and we're going to talk to him. And this is all building out of a conversation we had with a nurse whose identity we've kept private to safeguard her job. But she spoke to us about the need to have more help in the ER and something that needs to be done to improve movement of people, and maybe people that don't need to be in the ER. So they're dealing with a lot of people that are there for shelter because of houselessness. So that conversation about social workers' role fits into all of that, and it's coming up. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 25. There's cold, and then there's extreme cold. And that extreme cold warning continues. Wind chill values at minus 40 or colder through today for all of southern Manitoba. In Winnipeg today, sunshine, a high of minus 21. And tonight's low, even colder, minus 33 while you sleep tonight. Close to 200 people have spent the night in a downtown Winnipeg warming shelter this week, trying to escape this extended deep freeze. Siloam Mission says it recently expanded its overnight warming space because of a spike in demand. Julianne Aitken is the interim CEO at Siloam.
The needs are growing. The complexity of the needs are growing. We have a very diverse group of people who come. Some people, like a lot of people, come and they might only stay a couple nights, so it's not the same people staying over and over, and we track that in order to inform our decisions for housing and also to inform the sector of the need.
Aitken says outreach vans are patrolling downtown looking for people who need shelter. She says the mission is in desperate need of winter clothing, especially mitts and warm socks. And Aitken says medical teams have also been out treating people for frostbite. All Canadian premiers in Washington today, all 13 of them, kicking off a joint lobbying effort aimed at convincing the Trump administration to back away from its ongoing tariff threats. Manitoba's Wab Kinew says part of this is about relationship building.
For us, Manitoba, we've got a big steel mill in Selkirk, and so while we have this window of opportunity, we want to make the case. And so one of the things we're doing while we're down here is connecting with the steelworkers in the States. We've got a lot of steelworkers in Manitoba, and just let's get that message that what benefits that worker in our province benefits the worker in this country as well, too. So trying to make the American-Canadian friendship stronger.
Kinew even took to Instagram last night, walking in the Washington snow, saying Canada won't just extend a warm handshake, they may even help their friends shovel. Now, while the premiers are in Washington, the Minister of Public Safety will be on the border in Ontario. David McGuinty trying to demonstrate Canada has not forgotten its commitment to secure the border. Yesterday, the government named Kevin Brousseau as the country's new fentanyl czar. And Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says there is a lot of work already being done on the fentanyl file.
We have someone who's kind of heading all these efforts, making sure that we have one big voice on that. So I think you'll see action.
Brousseau was the top cop for RCMP in Manitoba more than a decade ago. The government says his experience as a Mountie has given him expertise in drug trafficking, organized crime networks, and other national security threats. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The Canada African Cup of Nations says none of the suspects connected to the homicide of Mohamed Abdullahi have ever played in its soccer tournaments. Last July, the 22-year-old was gunned down and killed after playing a game in that tournament. Winnipeg police have now arrested 2 men and charged them with first-degree murder. A warrant is out for the third suspect. Police believe they likely were at the game while concealing their identities. Godi Katembo, head of the Canada-Africa Cup of Nations, says the arrests provide a sense of justice and relief. And after checking their database,
those names did not come across either in our previous years. So these are individuals have never participated in our previous tournaments or even last year's tournament.
Katembo says security at their events has been increased. There are now metal detectors and security guards on site. The head of the Manitoba Nurses Union calls a health authority's exclusion from an audit unfair. 3 independent audits were released by the province last week. They found most Manitoba health agencies were regularly in the red between 2019 and 2024. The province said Southern Health was excluded because it has a record of balanced books. But Manitoba Nurses Union President Darlene Jackson says there's more to the story.
I speak to nurses all the time, and when I speak to nurses from Southern Health, what they tell me is the reason they don't run with a deficit is they don't fill those vacancies with overtime or agency. Nurses are just allowed to work below baseline and work short.
Jackson would like the province to look into how many nursing shifts and positions are sitting unfilled in Southern Health. And the Federal Privacy Commissioner has opened an investigation into a privacy breach that impacted about 3/4 of Manitoba school divisions. It involved a web-based student management system called PowerSchool, used by 28 of the 37 provincial school divisions. The cyber attack accessed data, including personal information of students and some staff. Commissioner Philippe Dufresne received a report about the breach from PowerSchool itself, and the office received a complaint. He says his immediate focus is to ensure the company is taking steps to address the issue and to protect Canadians' personal information. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get to our regional forecast with Abby Adiyemi.
-25 in Winnipeg with clear skies, light breeze. Expect a high of -22 today. The wind chill makes it feel like -36 this morning. Brandon, -34. It's partly cloudy in that part of the province. Sunny but frigid conditions ahead. You'd see highs around -27. Though the wind chill feels like -41 this morning. Dauphin -29. You get to see the wind chill feel like -42 this morning. Good morning, Gimli. You're sitting at -30. Expect a high of -22 today. The wind chill feels like -36 as you start your day. Flin Flon, the power, we're looking at temperatures around -34. The wind chill for that part of the province feels like -42. Up in Thompson, -37. A mix of sun and clouds in the forecast. We'll see wind chills around -39. And in Churchill, we do have ice crystals there at temperatures around -34. Expect a mix of sun and clouds. Temperatures will be dropping to around -32 this evening. And in summary, the cold continues for most of the province with the dangerous wind chills in the southern part of the province around -40 and even colder in some areas. Then up north, we're going to see temperatures even colder with the wind chills dropping even further.
You got to get the phone again, just like yesterday.
I'm coming.
Sorry, Abby. Abby's going to grab the phone.
That's my job.
Oh, Chloe's in
no.
here. Okay, tell us what's going on in the commute, and then Abby will update us if that's urgent.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So yeah, the commute. I was going to say the commuter line hasn't really been that active until right now. So thank you for calling. We are looking at King Edward and Wellington. There is a collision there with emergency crews on scene. That is blocking your southbound curb and middle lanes, as well as your eastbound right yield lane is also blocked. So if you're heading southbound at King Edward and Wellington, keep left to pass. If you're heading eastbound, you will need to use alternate routes. And just in general, if you would rather not wait in traffic today, you might just want to avoid King Edward and Wellington. We will see what that commuter call is all about coming up shortly here. But of course, if there is anything going on your commute that you think fellow commuters should know about, you can call us 204-788-3093.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can get this right because it was sort of whispered in my ear through the phone here. Neil has called our commuter line and was talking about the bridge, the Salter Street Bridge. So that's Slaw-Rebchuk Bridge, of course. So that means southbound on the bridge in the right lane, there's been an accident there. So Abby's nodding, which means I think I got that right. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Abby.
So if you're around the Salter Street Bridge, if you're around Slaw-Rebchuk Bridge, you're going to want to note that there's an incident that's happened there. That's as much info as we have. And thank you, Chloe. 788-3093 is where you can reach us, just like Neil did on our commuter line. Well, next on Information Radio on CBC on your Wednesday morning show, let's return to our special series of stories produced by filmmaking students in the CREATE program at Sisler High School in collaboration with CBC Manitoba. So today we're going to meet Orion Ramaquillo. He developed Tourette syndrome as a child. That condition is marked by uncontrollable physical and verbal tics. With perseverance, though, and the help of his mom, he says he has been doing great. He won a National Humanitarian Award. He's become a devoted volunteer, and he's on his way to becoming a gym teacher. He calls Tourette's his superpower. CREATE students Joshua Soriano, Giancola Calderola, and Marcus Penner produced the story. And the first voice you're going to hear is Orion Ramaquillo's.
It kind of just makes me embrace, just not fitting in, standing out. Having Tourette's, you're always going to be not with the crowd and kind of against the crowd. You're different, and having Tourette's kind of taught me how to embrace being different. And at the same time, as those things are kind of a curse, it's also kind of a blessing too that I have them, because it makes me different than anyone else.
My name is Orion Ramaquillo. I'm a 2023 Terry Fox Scholar. I'm an assistant here with the men's basketball team at the University of Winnipeg Westman, and I'm living with Tourette syndrome. I noticed my symptoms, or my family, was when probably I was about 7. We were on a trip in Orange County, California. And I can remember vividly that we went to Disneyland and we went to an Angels game there, and I could vividly remember just not being able to control myself in a crowd, not being able to handle myself. I'd have, things that would happen to me, I'd swear and I couldn't control it, or I'd flip people off in the distance, but I wasn't directing it towards them, but I just couldn't control it. And I could remember so vividly that my godfather was, telling me to stop, but I had to explain to him, for some reason, I can't stop doing what I'm doing right now.
Tourette's disorder is a disorder of tics. So with Tourette's, you have the presence of at least 2 motor tics and at least 1 vocal tic. For the most part, kids, particularly under the age of 13, don't know that they're doing tics. They're not aware of them. As kids get older, they become more aware, and they can start to sort of feel an urge prior to those tics. That's called a premonitory urge.
The way that I like to explain Tourette syndrome to people, and to people that don't know about it or what that is, picture you have a mosquito bite. Now, we all know it's bad to scratch the mosquito bite, but at the same time, you know that you can't control it. You have to itch it. That's what Tourette syndrome is basically It's like an uncontrollable itch.
They get worse. They follow broad patterns where they're worse in times of both excitement and stress. They are almost always worse in September when school's starting. They're worse over the holidays. They tend to be better during the summer when kids are a little bit more stress-free. And yeah.
You get some dirty looks, or people approach you hey, stop that. And my mom always advocated for me. She always stuck up for me in situations like that. So I owe it all to my mom for being there throughout my childhood for me in terms of my disability and all that.
It's really hard as a kid. It's even harder as a parent, right? Because you can't explain it to everybody that you meet. At the end of the day, he's going to have to stand up and advocate for himself. And that what your responsibility is to make sure that you build up enough confidence in him that he can advocate for himself, that he can stand up for himself.
Last 3-4 years, I've just been volunteering with the kids at the Special Needs and Resources Department at my old high school, Garden State Collegiate. It started as I was just going to volunteer with these kids just to get my volunteer hours up. And from there on, I had volunteered so many hours just helping them out. And then I started to realize, I actually enjoy working with people like me. Acknowledging that I have Tourette's and acknowledging what makes me me, and just trying to stand out from the crowd and just be my own person. So Tourette's is my superpower.
Those are the voices of Orion Ramaquillo, psychiatrist Dr. Evan Hildall, as well as Marianne Ramaquillo. CREATE students Joshua Soriano, Gianluca Calderola, and Marcus Penner produced the story with support from CBC Manitoba. For more on the story and to watch the video, in case you weren't watching the show on YouTube this morning as it streamed, you can check it out on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's news app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
7:44 is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Minus 25 in Winnipeg in the downtown area. It's minus 29 at the airport. Brandon is minus 33. Thompson is minus 40. So if you have to be anywhere and be outside for any length of time and you dress for it today, it's just that day. Hopefully you plug the car in and all of that. We do have an extreme cold warning that extends all across southern Manitoba for the day. Well, coming up after 8 o'clock on the program, yeah, it's cold, but we live here. So how do you live here in the winter months? We've been asking you to show us how you embrace winter, and not just with outside activities all the time. So you've been sending us in photos and videos, and that's what we want for our contest. Show us your winter. Whether it's your best pot of soup, sharing the recipe, what you're making. Maybe you're hosting people at a dinner inside and you do that regularly during the winter. We heard from someone that hosts international students, for example. Or maybe you are an outdoor type of person and you just bundle up and you go for it. So we still are taking entries for our contest to win at cbc.ca, photos and videos. And then along the way here, before we announce winners at the end of the week, we're highlighting some of the stories. So coming up after 8, we're going to hear from a Manitoba teacher who is showing students how to be brave in the face of the cold. So stay tuned. We'll have that story in a live interview for you after 8 o'clock. Next, so let's turn our attention back to our healthcare system, because this week we had a feature interview with a nurse who's worked for decades in the Health Sciences Centre Emergency Department about what it's like on the front lines. CBC News is concealing her identity to safeguard her job. She wondered at one point in our interview if hiring more social workers could be part of combating what she called the quote, chaos of the ER regarding the number of people who are there, the long wait times. But also one of the things she raised is the growing number of people who are living houseless, and they're often using the ER for shelter.
But it differs every day, so it's not really like a set number.
Yeah, I get that.
I mean, it's an average.
Yeah.
Sometimes we look and go, oh, we don't have any patients. They're all just here for shelter now. We got everybody else in. It just depends on the night and how busy it is and what's going on within the rest of the department. But
got it.
At triage, sometimes all of the people that are left in the waiting room are seeking shelter, seeking warmth, seeking food. I mean, not that we're not here to help the unhoused, but there's a whole group of people that are paid to do that. The shelter people, the people that are at the warm-up places. If you don't have a medical problem, you shouldn't be in an emergency room. I mean, mental health crisis definitely counts as a medical problem. A drug addiction counts as a medical problem. But if it's cold outside and you don't have anywhere to go, that isn't an emergency. That needs to go to a shelter, not an emergency room or an urgent care. Because I think they're getting overrun with the people, the unhoused population too, especially in this cold snap, right?
The Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals say that rising vacancies for emergency room social workers is impacting wait times. The group says there's a 48% vacancy rate for social workers in HSC's adult ER. And they've been raising the alarm on this since last fall. Now, Jason Linklater is president of the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals and here to weigh in this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Before we weigh in on sort of, the social workers' possible role in combating some of the challenges we've heard and such, people may not understand the role of social workers in an emergency department, like the one at HSC, for example. What would someone there be doing if they are a social worker in the ER?
For sure. So it's certainly not just medical issues that clog up the ER. To a large extent, it is those social issues. And they move patients through, get people home safely, and free up beds so that other patients can be seen. A big part of what they do is handling all of those social problems. They do, I can give an example, actually. Let's say a parent comes in for a medical issue, and they're under the influence of a substance, and they have a child in tow. Well, there's clearly a social issue there where in good faith you cannot discharge this person with this child. And so a social worker would take control of that problem, unload the responsibility for that patient, so that the nurses and doctors and other medical staff can deal with medical issues and make sure that that person and the child are discharged in a safe manner.
So when you say, that they can help sort of free up space if it's possible, if it's appropriate, and they can help people get home. If there were someone in the ER and it was determined that their medical problem, and you have to triage them, there's a legal requirement here, right? If they present to the desk, you have to triage them. But would a social worker potentially sit with a person and have a deeper conversation about why they're there? And if it's determined that maybe they don't need to be there, in fact, and you figure out that they are there for shelter and warmth, and that's the primary concern, could you safely take them out of the system and transport them to a shelter, for example, if that's their wish?
Yes, and under optimal circumstances, that is absolutely what would happen. But right now, there's that vacancy rate that you referenced earlier. One of the other issues that we have throughout the system, but specifically at HSC Emergency, is there's an 86% turnover rate, which is really shocking when you think about that. People don't normally take jobs and leave them within the period of a year like that. And that turnover rate is in the period of a year I'm talking about.
And you're talking specific 86% vacancy rate for social workers in that ER position, or social workers at HSC?
Social workers in that ER position, they can't retain people there. There's a bit of a vicious circle that happens, and once you are understaffed, the workload becomes greater and greater, and as people leave and you can't fill positions, that work falls on a smaller number of people, and then new people who come in, and it does take a significant amount of time for a social worker coming into the emergency room to be able to learn the ropes and figure out all of the different connections you need to make within the hospital environment, but also externally, so that you're discharging people into the appropriate environment. So there's a big learning curve that has to happen with social workers, and people aren't sticking it out.
How many social workers are there right now in the ER, and what to you would be optimal?
I believe there should be 12, and there's currently 7.
12 and there's currently 7. Okay, so that's positions in the room. How often, if I'm there, let's say I go to ER in an overnight tonight, is there going to be 7 social workers working that room, or is that what does a shift look like?
Yeah, that's shift too. So you know what? I'm not a social worker, just to be clear. But I do know that they do some shift, and so there's certainly not 7 there at during a day shift from 9 to 5 or something like that.
What do you think can be done to retain emergency room social workers? You said it's complex, but what in your view could be done to retain them?
Well, I think there needs to be resources allocated to training for sure. A lot of these people who come in to a new position are simply put with somebody who already has a caseload, and they're trying to train people who are immediately given a caseload as well. So it's a really difficult situation for these people to come into. Social workers also were part of the allied health grouping in the province, where we have 45 different professions, and social workers being one of them, and for a contract for 5 years, and currently they are contractless again. So there's not a really big impetus to go into this industry at the moment.
I want to ask you about where people possibly could be moved. Like if it's safe to move somebody out of the ER and it would be optimal for their care, it would work for the ER and obviously free up some space for other patients. I'm talking about the houseless population still here, obviously. We know that there is a program that connects down-housed patients with designated shelter beds. It's a pilot. We know it's been ongoing between different hospitals. Marion Willis at St. Boniface Street Links weighed in on this around the death of the man in the ER in January that happened at HSC. I wonder where social workers have fit into that pilot project or into conversations around that, since, as you're saying, they can be part of the solution.
For sure. And and I'm also talking about mental health and addictions workers as well. So all of that has to be dealt with on both sides. So you can't just deal with the hospital side, you have to deal with the community side as well. I do know that there's actually clinics that they're looking at that exist in cities like Toronto that actually are clinics, but they're intended for people who are in a situation where they're homeless or houseless and have nowhere to go, and for those mental health and addictions issues that don't require hospitalization. When I was listening earlier, I heard the nurse talking about the people who don't need to be in the ER because they're not dealing with emergency medical issues. And I think really to a great extent, that's exactly why the problems exist currently in the ER the way that they are.
You're right about Toronto. I was reading about that this week as well. Their clinic is standalone. It's right near the hospital in that city. And I apologize, I didn't write the name of the hospital down. But I was reading about it. So paramedics take them directly to there. So they don't even present at hospital first now. And then they have social services on site as well. And there's a number of different wraparound resources as well if that's a better fit for them. I wonder what your thoughts are on what we need to do moving forward in Manitoba. Then we have this pilot project. We've covered the concerns. We know what they are. But what do you think more about what the solutions could be?
I think the solutions really are about, at the moment, investing in staffing. Until Manitoba gets its staffing complement up to where it needs to be, all of the problems that I do believe government wants to fix can't be dealt with. You need people to do the work, and they're not keeping up with what they have now. So all of the really good ideas don't stand a chance without the adequate numbers of people. I think that's the very first step without even saying anything else.
We talked to the nurse as well, and one of the things she was just said, she was talking about how hard it was for her, just emotionally, just trying to make people feel good. She said some of the nurses will knit gifts and for people over the holidays. That some of the people living houseless that are there, they're there so often that they know their names. I mean, they're regulars. They have relationships with these people. But she said, I wish that her quote was, I wish there were a bus. Outside the emergency room, we could actually tell people, okay, don't come in here, go to the bus, and then the bus will take you to a shelter. What are the other reasons is there something going on as well where people are presenting to ER because at HSC specifically, there's not, geographically, there's not a shelter in that area of Winnipeg? Or what would have somebody go to the ER and not want to maybe go to a shelter? They're not finding a shelter or they don't want one?
Well, there's probably, it's very likely that a lot of the people with mental health and addictions issues find themselves in a situation where the emergency room seems like the most likely place that they should go to. I'm not sure whether they think of going to shelters or not, but their experience has been that if they go to an emergency room, they're somewhere safe.
They'll get help.
And
we obviously need to talk to people themselves about why they're making those choices. But Jason, thank you for weighing in on all of this. Really appreciate you being part of our series of conversations about our system.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
That's Jason Linklater. He's president of the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals. It is 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with news headlines this morning.
Good morning. And just moments ago in Washington, it is all about diplomacy.
The offensive that we're making here is a charm offensive. It's a friendship building, a relationship building exercise. And of course, as Canadians, we're always going to be able to stand up for ourselves. We always put our Canadian values first.
Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew with his counterparts from across the country in Washington this morning. They're kicking off a joint lobbying effort trying to convince the Trump administration to back away from their ongoing tariff threats. So we'll hear more about that coming up. As well, extreme cold is putting extra pressure on Winnipeg's downtown overnight warming space at Siloam Mission. The interim CEO there, Julianne Aitken, says the number of people needing help has ballooned to close to 200 because of this long-lasting deep freeze. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, still talking about the cold, but turning to something very different. After 8, we're going to take you to General Vanier School. If that's your school, be excited. We've got a feature about your Polar Bear Club coming up as we continue our contest. Show us your winter. It is minus 25 in Winnipeg. It's the real deal this morning, so take care and consider not being outside. Actually, if you don't have to be, bundle up, dress for it. Minus 40 in Thompson right now, and at the airport in Winnipeg, minus 29. Extreme cold continues. Stay with us on CBC.
On Cue with Tom Power.
We must become more than we were programmed to be.
The Oscar-nominated film The Wild Robot breaks some of the rules of modern animation. It has an old-school look. It focuses on motherhood. It has a subtle warning about climate change. The filmmaker and animator Chris Sanders will be here to tell you why. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Next, coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Communities across Canada are desperate to attract doctors and trying all sorts of different ways to do that. Some cities are hiring family physicians as employees and taking over their paperwork, leaving the doctor more time to see patients. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada's politicians are fighting for free trade with the United States and for the attention of our American neighbors. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith is in Washington, along with most of the other premiers.
I think diplomacy is working. I think that the fact that we got a 30-day reprieve was because we agreed to work on the cross-border problem of fentanyl.
Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc is also there for high-level talks. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Defence Minister Bill Blair are at talks in Brussels, standing up for Canadian sovereignty.
I would hope that the President will be briefed, for example, on how NORAD works. And for over 70 years, Canada and the United States have shared responsibility for continental defence through the NORAD arrangement.
And the Public Safety Minister is headed back to the border to show off our new security. Janice McGregor is watching it all from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what are the premiers hoping to accomplish today?
Marcia, for this lobbying campaign to work, premiers got to get themselves in front of people who have the power to influence Donald Trump and his inner circle. This assumes, though, that voices in Congress are prepared to stick their necks out and use their authority to push back against this tariff strategy. And so far, we haven't seen very much of that. Still, efforts continue to find Americans who get it and are prepared to be honest with Trump supporters that this isn't going to make U.S. industries rich. It's going to inflict great harm for manufacturers and consumers, too. Quebec Premier François Legault remains confident that his province's relatively green aluminum is still going to find a home. It's just going to get way more expensive.
Nobody believes that he can make more aluminum in the United States.
The difference between what we heard from premiers last week and this week, no premiers are making big threats to retaliate, at least not yet. The focus for the moment seems to be keeping tariffs off in the first place.
How does all of that dovetail with what Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc is doing today?
He's meeting in person with the Commerce Secretary at the heart of Trump's tariff strategy, Howard Lutnick. The economic arguments against this probably need to be relayed to and through him. Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne said, based on his meetings in Washington last week, corporate giants like Ford Motor Company, for example, are starting to make noise.
The tone is changing. Now it's American CEOs which are speaking up.
The strategy, though, behind Canada's campaign is premised on presidential power still being capable of being influenced, constrained by checks and balances. Unfortunately, so far, Trump's been unimpeded in his authoritarian push, with executive order after executive order flooding out of the White House.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. The future of Ukraine is taking center stage at two high-profile meetings today. European Union foreign ministers are meeting in Paris, while U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is at NATO headquarters in Brussels. They will not only be discussing future support for Ukraine, but President Volodymyr Zelensky's proposal to a land swap with Russia. The CBC's Crystal Mansing has more.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth shakes hands with his UK counterpart John Healey at NATO headquarters in Brussels. The exchange of pleasantries kicks off a series of conferences on security that will include Ukraine. Russian officials, meanwhile, say they're focused on peace through strength. A Russian Federation attack helicopter lifting off, striking, according to Russian Ministry of Defense, Ukrainian positions dug into the Kursk region.
I don't think Ukraine invaded the Kursk region in Russia with the intent of occupying it permanently.
Kurt Volker was the U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine during the first Trump administration.
They have something that Russia wants. Russia has something that they want. They can do a trade.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told the Guardian newspaper he plans to offer the Russian territory in exchange to help end the war. That has been a priority for President Donald Trump. Zelensky is expected to meet Trump's second-in-command, J.D. Vance, at the Munich Security Conference on Friday. As Ukrainians clean up following a deadly strike on the capital region, Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, called the idea of a land trade nonsense, citing today's early morning attack as a sign of Russia's strength. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Estonian foreign intelligence says China is playing a significant role in Russian military drone production. Some critical components of the drones are made in Western countries and subject to sanctions. According to Estonian intelligence, China has essentially become a smuggling hub, and now as much as 80% of these drone components are reaching Russia via China. Uganda's HIV clinics are now closed. The government quickly phased them out after the Trump administration froze U.S. aid funding. The clinics were created in the 1990s. They provided relief to hospitals overwhelmed with patients. Uganda has received hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. support for care and treatment. Isabel Nakaria has more from Kampala on the uncertainty of their fate.
I don't remember my primary school life spending more than a month without being hospitalized.
Josephine Nabukenya was born with HIV. She started taking antiretroviral drugs when she was 12 years old. Now, 28 years later, Nabukenya says she's alive because of care and treatment from U.S. aid funding to Uganda. Nabukenya says life without her drugs is a death sentence.
I got herpes zoster 3 times. The worst time I got it was in the mouth. I couldn't eat. For like 2 weeks, I could not eat anything. So life without medication brings so many opportunistic infections that actually lead to the person's death.
1.2 million Ugandans living with HIV are on medication. Over 80% of this support comes from U.S. funding. The Ministry of Health has now shut down all HIV clinics in public facilities and integrated HIV services with general health care services. But Diana Atwini, the permanent secretary with Uganda's Ministry of Health, says it shouldn't affect patients.
In most of these clinics, the people who would receive in HIV people, they are just medical officers, junior people, even nurses. But we are saying, no, this time you must come and be seen by the doctor in our clinic.
A waiver of life-saving assistance like HIV care was issued as the U.S. reviews its foreign policy. But this temporary relief is putting a lot of anxiety on Nabukenya and millions of others living with HIV. Isabel Nakiria for CBC News, Kampala.
The United Nations Human Rights Office estimates as many as 1,400 people were killed last summer in Bangladesh. It all happened in a period of just 6 weeks during student-led protests against the now ousted prime minister. A UN team was deployed to Bangladesh to investigate. Their report is now out. It says security and intelligence services systematically violated the protesters' rights, and authorities' actions could amount to crimes against humanity. Thousands of unplanned power outages left many Nova Scotians in the dark last year. A CBC News analysis found that meant on any given day in 2024, some people in the province were without power. Nicolas Seguin has more on what happened and what's being done to prevent it from happening again.
When the power goes out, cattle farmer David Meister loses his watering system, fences, and barn cleaner. They are all electric, so caring for the animals at his ranch in New Ross, Nova Scotia gets a lot harder.
You don't know when it's going to go out or for how long it's going to be back. That just adds to the uncertainty.
A CBC News analysis identified more than 4,700 power outages in Nova Scotia last year, with a median 65 customers affected each time. There was just one day where the power stayed on for everyone.
There should be months on end without outages.
Lucia Muhlenbox is an energy economics professor at the University of Calgary.
It sounds like a tremendous number of outages.
Nova Scotia Power has been fined 4 times since 2019 by the province's regulatory body for falling short of some performance standards. The utility says trees on power lines, high winds, and fires are top outage causes. Matt Drover is the Senior Director of Energy Delivery at Nova Scotia Power.
Reliability has definitely been challenged by the increase of the severe and frequent storms.
Drover says in the next 5 years, Nova Scotia Power is planning to spend $1.3 billion on power reliability upgrades.
We're out cutting trees every single day. We're replacing power poles. We're replacing the equipment on top of the poles.
Some in rural areas, like Meister, say the work seems to be paying off so far. He's hoping his lights will stay on all winter. Nicholas Sagan, CBC News, New Ross, Nova Scotia.
And that is the latest from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday morning here, and we've got an extreme cold warning once again today across southern Manitoba. Today, even colder than yesterday. Right now, it's minus 25. Here's the kicker, folks. That's Winnipeg downtown, and that is the warm spot in the province, minus 25. But we're a hardy bunch, right? This half hour on the program, we're going to continue hearing how you celebrate winter, whether it's inside or outside. We're asking you simply to show us your winter. It's part of a contest. We've got some CBC warm swag up for grabs. We're going to meet a teacher who runs their own recess polar bear club. We'll hear how that started. So stay tuned for that. Also, if you're a YouTube watcher of our program, we're going to share some of your photos and a couple videos as well that have been coming in for the contest. So that's all ahead this half hour. But first, in a moment, we're going to hear from Premier Wab Kinew, who has been at the microphone this hour. He and the other premiers, as you heard, are in Washington to push back against the imposed tariffs that are coming. Proposed tariffs, rather, that are coming. So we'll hear what Wab Kinew had to say. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our news center with other headlines.
Good morning. Well, close to 200 people have spent the night in a downtown Winnipeg warming shelter this week, trying to escape this frigid February weather. Salome Mission says it recently expanded its overnight warming space because of a spike in demand. Julianne Aitken, the interim CEO there, says outreach vans are patrolling downtown, and she says medical teams have also been treating people for frostbite. So we'll hear what they're in need of coming up. As well, the head of the Manitoba Nurses Union calls a health authority's exclusion from an audit unfair. 3 independent audits were released by the province last week. Not included was Southern Health. And Darlene Jackson would like the province to look into how many nursing shifts and positions are sitting unfilled in Southern Health. She says the fact they were excluded is not fair. I'll be back with more news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Got to say, Heather, we should chat about what we were talking about in the newsroom, which is this whole thing that we're talking about outside of course, the dangerous cold. If you do have the wherewithal to be, lucky enough to have shelter, be able to dress for it, then there's probably ways that you embrace it. And this contest we're running has certainly brought in a lot of wonderful photos and videos. But what I like the best about it is that we, for the first time, I think, opened it up to if you don't really love being outside, what do you do inside to survive winter, right?
That's me. I'm not that person.
Yeah. But you were reflecting on how it really builds community in a way that actually summer doesn't.
Yeah, you know what? We've been seeing these stories that we've been doing here at CBC. The curling story. You were out this past weekend when it was so cold curling with people. We've had Jim Agapita go out where this woman built this beautiful, colorful igloo and opens it up to the community. Come in and be a part of it. And they have been. So all these community things are happening. But you know what? In the summer, you drive down a community and the streets are empty because everyone's out of town. They're all like on holiday say. You know, it seems like there is a special bond that this cold can bring.
And I feel like you don't sort of, if you're like walking out there doing something out in the summertime, it's like everyone's enjoying the nice day, but you kind of maybe keep to yourself. But in the winter, it's like, I'm out here, you're out here. Like you have this weird thing that happens between people when you walk by and you go, you know, wipe your nose and your eyes all full of ice and you're like, I'm out here.
You're surviving it together.
Yeah, I know. It's this strange thing that happens. I like that we're celebrating that aspect of it. Anyway, all right, let's get into what's happening otherwise. Now it is time to turn to the actual temperatures, which are shocking this morning, Abby.
Yeah, the extreme cold snap continues across the province this morning. We do have widespread extreme cold warnings in effect for all of southern Manitoba. Most areas feeling temperatures around minus 40 and even colder due to the wind chill. But in Winnipeg, minus 25 at this time. Clear conditions. We should see the sun make its appearance later. As mentioned, extreme cold warning also in effect for Winnipeg. It's going to be mostly sunny today, but it will be very cold. Highs will only get to minus 21. However, the wind chill makes it feel like minus 36 this morning, so be careful. Frostbite can happen in minutes. Few clouds tonight. Wind chill continues minus 43 overnight, so you want to take care. Very cold across the province. Highs will be between minus 28 to down south and minus 28 in the northern part of the province, though the wind chill makes it feel around minus 40, 41, 42, 43 in most of the areas, with the north really feeling colder because we have more stronger winds in that part of the province. But today in Winnipeg, it's sunny but dangerously cold and a high of 21.
Let's get to the commute now with Chloe Friesen.
Hello. King Edward's busy place to be right now. So King Edward and Wellington, there are crews on scene. There was a collision there earlier, and now crews are on scene repairing a downed traffic standard. Lights are flashing red in all directions. Police are on scene directing traffic. So your southbound curb and middle lanes, along with the eastbound right yield lane, remain blocked. If you're heading southbound, keep left to pass. And if you're heading eastbound, you want to find an alternative route there. Also on King Edward, this is at Logan. There's a stall currently blocking your southbound left turn lane just at the stop line there, so keep right to pass. If there's anything else going on, give us a call on our commuter line, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Chloe. We're actually going to shift gears quickly here. We're going to take you live to Washington. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc is there with all of the premiers in Washington this hour. We will hear from Wab Kinew in a moment. But he is taking reporters' questions about the tariffs, and he may be in the portion where you'll hear him through the voice of a translator speaking en français. Here's Dominic LeBlanc.
So I have a job that I love, and this is an important time for the country. We have an extremely positive relationship with Mr. Legault on all those issues, so we will continue to do the work that's needed, and Canadians will have an opportunity to vote in an election sooner.
How much do you think this is perhaps a personal vendetta against Mr. Trudeau? Like, do you think that President Trump's seeming dislike for Mr. Trudeau is driving any of this punishment of Canada?
I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I don't spend my time imagining what motivates people. I have a job to do as Canada's finance minister to try and strengthen the economy of Canada. Our most important economic relationship is with the United States. It has been a source of prosperity and security for both countries for decades. The Americans chose a new administration that has views on tariffs and what it means for their economy. So our job is to make Canada's case that we're much stronger working together as economic partners than applying tariffs on one another. We have a number of weeks to make that argument, and that's the main focus of what we're doing, and we're not spending our time imagining the motivations of anybody. It's not particularly constructive.
So that is Dominic LeBlanc, live feed out of Washington this morning, the Minister of Finance for Canada. He is there with all of the premiers right now in Washington, and they are talking tariffs. So they are lobbying U.S. business leaders and lawmakers to try to fend off these threats. Yesterday, you might recall, you may have been plugged into the news that not only is the threat now this week that was new, the 25% on steel and aluminum, but Donald Trump made it clear yesterday, the U.S. president, that will be on top of the 25% proposed tariffs that could kick off in March as well. So that means 50% tariff on aluminum and steel. So at the moment, the U.S. is threatening two actions. That worldwide tariff of 25% still on aluminum, that's March 12th, in case you're looking at the dates. And then it's also paused till March 4th, that additional threat I mentioned of the economy-wide 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico. And they're working on border security deals right now with Mexico and Canada in the face of this discussion as well. The White House said Tuesday, pardon me, I've already reiterated all of this information about the numbers. Let's go right to Wab Kinew, who is our premier. He spoke in Washington within the last hour.
So I just wanted to say, over the past few weeks, Canadians have seen that we can get results when we stick up for ourselves. And we are tough as Canadians. I mean, you see a little bit of snowfall here. The entire city of Washington, D.C. comes to a halt. But us Canadians, we're going outside without our coats on. And on peut le faire dans une façon bilingue en même temps.
And we can do it bilingually as Canadians.
It's not for us to come down and try to issue ultimatums and things like that. The purpose of the trip here is diplomacy. It's the warm and hearty handshake, making the case that the Canadian-American friendship has been the best in the world for decades and decades, and we want to continue that for decades more. And so the offensive that we're making here is a charm offensive. It's a friendship building, a relationship building exercise. And of course, as Canadians, we're always going to be able to stand up for ourselves. We always put our Canadian values first. But in this moment, it's crucial for us to use this window that we have with no tariffs to try and keep things that way.
That is Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew speaking within the last hour in Washington to reporters. He's on that unprecedented gathering of all of the premiers who are in Washington right now to try to push back against the tariffs.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
Well, up next on the show, so far this week, we have met a woman in Winnipeg who built an igloo in her yard. We've also visited friends who built a neighborhood curling rink down the Assiniboine River. So we've been to a couple different neighborhoods. This was all part of our CBC Manitoba Show Us Your Winter Week. Our next guest emailed in her story. Marcia Leary is a grade 3 and 4 teacher at General Vanier School in Winnipeg, and she's been getting students to embrace the cold in a fun, safe way. They've started their own polar bear club. So kids with permission from their parents go outside on those really cold days where otherwise there's probably indoor recess. She says the kids have been loving it, and she's with us now. Hi, Marcia.
Good morning.
So tell me about why you started Polar Bear Club and how the very first one went over.
Well, I can't take all the credit. I have a student in my class. I'm going to shout out to Emmett, who the very first indoor recess in December let out a huge groan when it came over the announcements that we had to stay inside. And it just made me think that over the years I've wondered why can't we just bundle them up and take them out for a quick little even run around the school, just burn off some energy and get some fresh air. And so him and I together created a letter to the principal and did some research about some other clubs that we found online. And we put it out to the staff and then out to the families. And the first one, I had only 6 students. And yesterday we had 15.
Wow.
So it's going over well.
What's the reaction of the kids and what kinds of activities have you been doing?
Well, the kids, I think, love the fact that they're, outside in a small group with an adult. They don't often get to be out there. The first day it was me and 6 students from my class. So they thought it was pretty awesome to have that time just with me. They tried soccer one day, and we have a Gaga ball pit that they love, but they discovered it's way too cold. The balls hurt when they hit you and it's cold.
I don't know what a Gaga ball pit is.
Oh, it's actually a game, I believe, that comes from Australia. It's kind of like dodgeball, but you play it inside sort of a fenced area, round fenced area. Yeah, and you hit with your hands below the knees. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, yeah, I know
fun.
what it is now. Okay, yeah.
But the balls are way too cold, so that didn't last long. So now it's sleds and shovels and race the teacher on the sled. Yeah, that seems to be the big one.
You mentioned, I understand that for the kids who are part of this, for some of them, it's having a really positive impact also on their attention once they're back in class. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You find, especially on the days that they're inside morning, lunch, and afternoon, the last couple hours of the day can be really, really hard on some of them. Some days we don't have a gym class. Some days our gym class is in the morning. So by the end of the day, they're really struggling. And as much as we have access to wonderful things like projectors where we can do movement breaks and, we can bring in yoga and all of those things, being outside with other people, just, that unstructured, being able to just move their bodies, it's so helpful. Then they come in and they're just able to focus again. That heavy muscle work kind of grounds them. They can sit, in their space again, get back down to work if we have things to do. So it's definitely, I've seen a positive impact on my kiddos with that for sure.
I bet. What temperature won't you go outside in? Obviously there's parental, permission involved here, but once you get the permission, as long as kids are bundled, will you do the minus 30?
Oh, yeah. Minus 30 is our cutoff that we don't go out at all. For the general school, that's where we wouldn't go out at all, anyone. So after minus 30, Polar Bear Club will go between minus 30 and minus 40. And again, the kids have to be bundled. The staff volunteers, so wonderful staff here. Lots of people have stepped up to say they would brave the cold with the kids. And it's up to the kids and the adult that's outside. So if the kids decide 5 minutes, they're done, they come back in. If the adult decides 5 minutes, we're done, they come back in. But we've lasted 15 all of the recesses we've done, and we do make sure the kids, are covered. Usually just their eyeballs are sticking out. Yesterday, one of my guys was like, "It's so warm out here," and he started to take his coat off. I'm like, no, the sun's shining, but no.
That's for coming inside when you've got that layer of sweat underneath and you're like taking off your toque, right? What's the reaction from the parents? I mean, those who have given permission, what's the interaction with them been like?
I haven't really had any feedback yet other than just the forms that have come back. Maybe we'll get some now. And we've been lucky this winter. I think we've only had 3 days where we've been stuck inside. So we'll see this week. Actually, our class, our 3-4 classes, 3 of us are off to Fort White today. So we are really embracing the winter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you guys enjoy it. You've got a perfect day for Polar Bear Club to shine because it's going to be cold.
Yes, absolutely.
But appreciate you writing in for our contest. You're also entered then to win some CBC swag. And thank you for sharing.
Great. Thanks for having me.
That's Marsha Leary. She's a grade 3-4 teacher at General Vanier School, as she mentioned. So we want to see your winter. That's the contest that Marsha entered. So no matter how big or small, Marsha wrote in about Polar Bear Club. Some of you are writing about other things. Maybe you do something outside. Maybe you do something inside. To enter, send a picture or a short video to win@cbc.ca. So win@cbc.ca is how you enter. Some of you have also been posting pictures and videos on my Facebook page. Include a brief description so we know what we're looking at. Everyone who sends something in will be entered to win a fabulous CBC Winter Prize Pack. We will draw a name at random at the end of the week. Now, right now, let's get into, especially if you're watching on YouTube, seeing some of the photos you've already sent in, and then also a couple of the videos that have come in as well. And I'll read some comments here as well. We've got big pots of stew and soup. We've got people crocheting on the couch. We've got photos of people outside running, completely bundled up. Lots of people covered in pets, especially cats seem to be furry and fluffy. Beautiful shots of just outdoor winter ski trails and curling rinks, backyard rinks, snowshoeing. Some of the comments here that came in, Geraldine Lee Shingu says, I make bannock. And I made bannock pops this weekend. Here's a photo of my bannock pops. Jim Sim writing in snowshoeing with friends on Lake of the Woods. Lynn Thacker Ty says, I get out and walk every day, weather permitting or not. Vicki Rempel says, I host international students. She sent a great pic of her and students all around the table. Vicki Rempel, pardon me. She also added she got new triple pane windows. I kind of love that one, right? Just gorgeous shots of sundogs and all kinds of things. And finally, Denise Burnett saying, I just enjoy seeing the deer close enough to my work that I stop and I take photos and videos of them. And I have to admit, I also enjoy shoveling snow when my body isn't too sore. So it's really nice to see all the videos and see the photos of y'all enjoying winter out there. As we mentioned, if you want to share a recipe or a video of you, making your recipe for the winter, what do you snuggle in with? beautiful video to end with if you're watching on YouTube of someone canoeing on one of our many lakes. Just gorgeous. Show us your winter. Win at cbc.ca. We'll choose our winners at the end of the week.
A modestly priced hair salon offered a real dumb coupon.
Not $50 off, $50 on.
The city of Vienna posted negative online comments over spectacular photography. And a discount airline embraced their cheap aesthetic.
We call that flying smart class.
Advertising to haters on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen.
Minus 25, the temperature in Winnipeg right now. The commute this morning, if you need us, 788-3093. If you have any updates, we'll have a last look at what's going on with Chloe after your 8:30 news. I want to give thanks to the people who particularly worked on items today for Information Radio on the morning show, and they are in part our live team, Abby Adeyemi, Kevin Tabo, and Chloe Friesen, as well as our news department, Alana Cole and Megan Ketcherson and Heather Wells, and the associate producers that worked on some of our interviews today, Kalkada Mulageta, Chidi Akuma. Additionally, we had Robin Summerfield, who's been filling in as producer in unit this week, and Leif Larson, who's the senior producer of audio here at CBC Manitoba. Thank you all for your work, day in, day out, and on the program, particularly today. We're coming up to news time here at 8:30, and then a reminder that The Current is coming up right after with Matt Galloway. And so stay tuned for that here on CBC. And then more local programming through the day. So Radio Noon from noon to 1, and then Up to Speed with Faith Fundal between 3 and 6 o'clock this afternoon. So many hours of local programming. In addition, I want to remind you about the weekend morning show with Nadia Kidwai and our ongoing initiatives that Nadia actually leads called Communities in Focus. So if you have an idea for where we should be focusing, whether it's a community that's an actual town or a village or a city somewhere else in Manitoba you think we should focus on, let us know. Or if it's a space in the city of Winnipeg. You might have heard we were at Red River, of course, in U of M most recently. You can always pitch us on our listener line, 788-3205. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is minus 25 in Winnipeg, still under that extreme cold warning. It's going to be sunny in Winnipeg today, a high of minus 21 with a risk of frostbite. That extreme cold warning covers all of southern Manitoba with wind chill values close to minus 40. Another Canadian lobby campaign is underway in Washington. All Canada's premiers are in the U.S. Capitol. The aim is to win over Republican members of Congress whose districts will feel the effect of any Trump trade action. As he arrived last night, Manitoba's Wab Kinew took to Instagram to talk about relationship building.
We brought the snow. Canada's premiers and I are here in Washington, D.C., making the case to the American public, standing up for jobs in Manitoba, standing up for jobs across Canada. We're all a little puzzled by this talk of tariffs, but we're still here with that warm and hearty handshake, and who knows, we might even help our friends shovel.
Kinew reiterating those statements just a few minutes ago in Washington. Now, Kinew calls this a window of opportunity to connect with steelworkers in America, letting them know things that benefit Manitoba steelworkers benefit them as well. Manitoba's reserves of rare earth minerals are something Premier Kinew has talked about when it comes to trade and tariffs with the U.S. Mustafa Fayek is a professor emeritus at the University of Manitoba's Department of Earth Sciences. He says Manitoba is rich in lithium, nickel, copper, and silica.
Lithium batteries. Nickel is also used in batteries and for EVs, so nickel cadmium batteries. And then copper is generally used to make copper wires, which are used in electric motors. And silica is generally used for solar panels.
Fayek says Manitoba is one of the largest producers in the world of tantalum. Tantalum is in high demand because it's used to produce electronic capacitors. Extreme cold is putting some extra pressure on Winnipeg's downtown overnight warming space at Siloam Mission. Interim CEO Julianne Aitken says the number of people needing help has ballooned because of this long-lasting deep freeze.
We've recently moved from a smaller drop-in actually into our larger drop-in because the needs have grown. So we started seeing under 100 to 130, and now it's up to 180 people, like unique people each night who need a safe place and a warm space.
Aitken says it's not the same people seeking help every night. She says some stay a few nights and then move on. Outreach vans are combing through downtown Winnipeg looking for those in need of shelter. And she says the mission is in desperate need of winter clothes, especially mitts and warm socks. As well, medical teams have been treating people for frostbite. A semi-truck driver has been charged after a crash last evening on Highway 75. It happened just after 6 at the intersection with Highway 305 in St. Agathe. RCMP say a truck carrying washer fluid drove through a southbound lane on 75, colliding with an SUV. The driver and passenger in the SUV suffered non-fatal injuries, but the driver was taken by STARS to hospital, STARS Air Ambulance. The driver of the semi was slapped with a serious offense notice and ticketed for careless driving. The head of the Manitoba Nurses Union calls health authorities' exclusion from an audit unfair. 3 independent audits were released by the province last week. They found most Manitoba health agencies were regularly in the red between 2019 and 2024. The province said Southern Health was excluded because it has a record of balanced books. But Manitoba Nurses Union President Darlene Jackson says there is more to the story.
I speak to nurses all the time, and when I speak to nurses from Southern Health, what they tell me is the reason they don't run with a deficit is they don't fill those vacancies with overtime or agency. Nurses are just allowed to work below baseline and work short.
Jackson wants the province to look into how many nursing shifts and positions are sitting unfilled in Southern Health. Well, all of Canada's living former prime ministers are asking Canadians to fly the national flag this Saturday as a sign of patriotism amid tariff threats from the U.S. Joe Clark, Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, Stephen Harper, and Kim Campbell have signed a joint letter.
On big issues, we tend to come together. This is the same thing that over the last few weeks with the statements that President Trump has made, there's been a lot of closing ranks. And this is an opportunity for us to come together and say there are some issues where we're all Canadian.
This Saturday is Flag Day, an annual holiday marking the first time the red and white maple leaf flag was raised on Parliament Hill in 1965. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I don't often speak personally on the show. You try not to, especially around something tied to the news. But I will say that for the first time in my life, Heather, I actually was going to get a flag and put it up outside the house. Like, I've never thought that before. You see people that have flags on their properties, but I thought maybe we should put something up on have a flagpole out there.
A show of unity.
Yeah, I don't know. You see them all over the States. It's always been sort of on people's houses. I mean, there's so many American flags everywhere you go. So we'll see what happens Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into what's happening in, first of all, the commute, and then a quick look at the weather.
Yes, a commute update. That stall on King Edward and Logan has been cleared. All lanes are open. Northbound Osborne, just past Roslyn. This is on the Osborne Bridge. There is a collision blocking your northbound median lane. Keep right to pass. And then lastly, King Edward and Wellington. The lights are flashing red due to a down traffic standard. Crews are on scene repairing that, and police are on scene directing traffic. Thank you to everyone who called in on the commuter line this morning.
Thanks, Chloe. Abby.
Extreme cold across the province, with temperatures staying well below minus 30 today, especially in southern Manitoba and the central regions. Wind chill will be severe. We're looking at wind chills in the range of minus 40, 41, 42, and 43.
All right. Enough said. Bundle up, stay warm, stay safe, take care, and thank you for listening to Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC. The Currents coming up next.